We'll be starting shortly. We are waiting for just Madame la Ministre. She will be with us. So please take your seat. We are going to have a very exciting plenary session. So let us calm down, relax, and just 1 or 2 minutes we will be started. So now the room is complete. Once again, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the plenary session entitled The Identification Arena, which continues our list of plenaries this morning. If you're joining us online, then welcome to the 31st livecast, which is being brought to you live from the Ambassador's Auditorium in the Palais de Congrès in Marrakesh, Morocco, where the ID4Africa 2022, the Augmented General Meeting, is underway. I'm Joseph Atick, Executive Chairman of ID4Africa, and I'm pleased to be hosting this episode and this panel, which will consist of 4 segments. I would like to start segment 1 of this plenary session by welcoming the Honorable Minister of Communication and Digital Economy of the Federal Government of Nigeria, Professor Ali Ibrahim Pantami. My guest is a professor of cybersecurity and is widely known as the Digital Minister. He has chaired or is involved in just about every committee in Nigeria related to digital transformation, digital identity, national harmonization, and interoperability with the rest of the continent. Professor Pantami, thank you for being with us for this one-on-one conversation, and I'd like to invite you to the stage. Protocol. Thank you. Thank you. Please have a seat. Now, NIMSI, which is the National Identity Management Commission of Nigeria, is building the continent's largest identity system, which is now under your supervision. I mean, clearly this is a responsibility on your shoulders, but it's also something that must be very exciting to you, knowing your passion for digital and for identity. My question to you is, share with us and the audience, what is your vision for the identity ecosystem of Nigeria and for where you want to see NIMSI going?
Thank you very much for...
Here we go.
Thank you very much for commending our modest effort in building the biggest and also the largest national database in Africa, particularly looking at our population. And furthermore, my vision for NIMSI is to ensure that the national database under the National Identity Management Commission becomes the primary database in the country. And secondly, it also becomes the database to be utilized for national planning when it comes to education, agriculture, security, commerce, economy, and many more. In addition, as you all know that Nigeria established a ministry for the digital economy in which I happen to be the minister in charge of that ministry on the 14th of October 2019. The digital ID is always the foundation for building a digital economy. There are prerequisites to achieving a digital economy when it comes to citizens' involvement. Number 1 is digital ID. Digital ID, according to Deloitte, is the fabric for building a digital economy. Number 2, bank account. Number 3, broadband penetration. And number 4, smartphone. These are the 4 requirements for involving citizens towards building a digital economy. So our passion is to ensure that database under the National Identity Management Commission in Nigeria becomes, number 1, the primary database, and number 2, it becomes the database to be utilized for our national planning in whatever we do, and number 3, to become the foundational ID of building our digital economy in Nigeria. From the time, and the effort so far is encouraging, from the time NIMSI was transferred to me to be under my supervision in 2020, the commission was established in 2007. By 2020, the time it was transferred to my supervision, it spent 13 years. And the total enrollment in the database was around 41 million people. But from October, or let me say from around August, when it was transferred to me, and October, when the process was finalized in 2022, to May this year, in 2020 to May this year, we have increased the enrollment to over 83 million people.
So almost doubled.
More than double, really. And this is what we have achieved within less than 2 years compared to the previous achievement of more than even the achievement of 13 years. Right. So the database is 83 million, which by implication, I think most probably only 3 countries in Africa, excluding Nigeria, that their population
that high
exceeds that. Only, I think, Ethiopia, Egypt, and DR Congo.
And you already have that foundational database covering
yes.
these people. We're going to talk about where it's going to go, and of course, DJ Aziz will be with us in the 4th segment, who will give us a little bit more detail. But I wanted to talk to you about, clearly, you've got the momentum with you now. You're
yes.
pushing forward, and you have a wonderful vision, and so the potential for the ecosystem is enormous. There's one thing that's puzzling, and it would be helpful if you can give your analysis of it, and has to do with the fact that lawmakers in Nigeria have yet to create the enabling legislation for presumably what could be the most important infrastructure development in the country. What is that due? Why is Nigeria not arriving at getting the lawmakers to put the law that will define the framework for what NIMSI can do, but also assure the public that privacy and data protection are protected? Where are we?
To be fair with you, we don't have any vacuum in Nigeria with regards to the issues you have raised. If you look at NIMSI Act 2007, you will clearly discover that the law empowers the agency to collect citizens' data, particularly Section 25, 26, 27, 28, and up to the last chapter, 29. If you go through this, you will discover that there is no any vacuum. NIMSI is supposed to be the central database of the country, and if you look at the board members of NIMSI, beside 3 external members, all the remaining board members are representatives of critical institutions of government that collect data, like Central Bank of Nigeria, Internal Security, Office of National Security Advisor, Police, National Population Commission, Federal Inland Revenue Services, and many more. They constitute the board of NIMSI. So we have a law in place. And in that law, it has been mentioned clearly in Section 27 that no one is allowed to enjoy government services without obtaining this national identity number in Nigeria. Even government service is not allowed. It is mandatory for obtaining passport, mandatory for writing any exam, mandatory for driver's license, and many more. And failure to obtain it after a period of time, there is going to be a sanction. And this is stated in Section 29 of the law. When it comes to privacy and data protection, I think Nigeria should be commended for that. Nigeria most probably could be the first country to come up with a law on data protection. That is Nigeria Data Protection Regulation. The law was approved on the 28th of January 2019. And in that law is Nigeria Data Protection Regulation.
Yes.
However, it was a subsidiary legislation. But in our law, subsidiary legislation is almost as powerful as the principal legislation. Because based on our law, a regulatory body has power to come up with a subsidiary law. And that subsidiary law is almost as powerful as the principal law that empowers that regulatory body to come up with it. And up to the Supreme Court in Nigeria, a subsidiary legislation is being presented as a law. Furthermore, on that issue, recently, based on a memo I have written to the President of Nigeria, President Muhammad Buhari, he has approved the establishment of Nigeria Data Protection Bureau. So now we have an institution of government, an agency of government that is mandated to ensure data privacy and data protection. In addition, we have also another principal legislation in the pipeline, that principal legislation. So we are done with the draft, and now it is before the National Assembly.
So it's a parliamentary activity. That's
now we have a parliamentary beside the subsidiary legislation. In addition, if you look at the issue of data protection in Nigeria, it's not just an issue of an existing law, but rather it is a constitutional requirement. If you look at the Constitution of Nigeria, Section 37, you will clearly see that privacy and protection of your conversation and many more are not only being provided by law, but rather they are constitutional. And this is in addition to so many existing laws where we have provision of data protection in the country. So it is because of this I want to say that the issue of privacy and data protection have been covered by the existing legislation we have.
And so they did not feel there was an urgency to rush and do something wrong? Or why haven't they? Because in many countries, regulations are in place, but regulations are government-issued, basically laws, but they're not legislations passed by the parliament as fundamental.
That is why I said what we did for having the subsidiary legislation is to ensure there is no vacuum.
There's no
and
vacuum.
two, the process of enacting a law differs from one country to another. And also the power of law depends. So in Nigeria, subsidiary legislation is a law, and we already have subsidiary legislation. And when it comes to the principal legislation, it is in the pipeline. Now it is before the National Assembly.
Okay. What would you tell our brothers and sisters in other countries when it comes to the enabling legislation for their foundational ID systems? What do you advise them based on your long experience in this domain?
To be fair, what I will say, usually our people feel uncomfortable when they are urged to obtain national ID. They usually feel uncomfortable. Why? People want change, but nobody wants to change. They don't want to change individually, but they need to see positive change in their countries. So what is most important is to convince your citizens that digital ID is not just beyond knowing your identity, but rather having a national database in your country is a prerequisite to your success towards education, because with a complete database, government will be able to come up with a plan and policies for education, plan and policies for healthcare, plan and policies for agriculture, plan and policies for security. Without having a complete database, government will just continue to make assumptions, and that could not lead to a very successful result. Number two, let us also remind them that it is difficult to achieve sustainable development goals of the United Nations without having digital ID in our country. And that is why the United Nations set up a target which could be a bit ambitious but realistic, that by 2030, each and every person in the world should have a legal identity. And this is under 16.9. Each and every person in the world should have a legal identity. And based on the report of the United Nations Development Program, as at May 2022 this year, around nearly 1 billion people in the world do not have a legal identity, almost 1 billion people. So this is a huge number. And by implication, is almost near the population of Africa as a continent.
Yes, in fact, half of those billion are in Africa. So
half of that is in Africa.
In Africa.
So they don't even, not only digital ID, they don't even have a legal identity. Some they exist, but they don't have any identity to show that they are from this part of the world or this country.
Right.
So I think this is something also that is very important. In Africa, we should not be left behind. Identity is key, even not to your government, but to you personally, it is key to your success.
But my question is more like, before you start building programs, should you be doing a legal review to make sure? I always cite Morocco, for example. Before they started writing a single line of code, they ensured that the legal framework was in place to make sure every aspect of data protection, privacy, and authority to do things were coherently done and passed by the parliament. So right now, we are seeing, not just in Nigeria, we're seeing a hybrid arise. Basically, you go and you build systems, and then you build laws. Perhaps you had good regulations, so that covered the law. But if there's a vacuum, wouldn't you believe that we should pay more attention to the legal framework so people get more trust?
As I earlier insisted, there is no vacuum in Nigeria.
In Nigeria, there's no vacuum.
There is no vacuum. But what I only say, that we are coming up with a principal legislation, but as of today, there is no vacuum.
Okay.
Because the Nigeria Data Protection Regulation is very clear on that, and it is a law in Nigeria.
Okay.
The provision of our Constitution, Section 39 and Section 37, very clear. If you look at even NIDA Act 2007 under Section 6, is also very clear, the issue of data protection. If you look at Freedom of Information, Section 14, there is a provision of data protection in our law. And if you look at also the NIMSI Act, under Section 26, there is a provision of data protection and regulation. So there is no vacuum.
You have a rich.
However, we are only trying to improve on the existing laws we have, but there is no vacuum.
Okay, let's move on to the question of, which is on the mind of many of the identity authorities, about how to finance these projects. There's a puzzle that emerges once you start talking about that. India's most respected government policy institute, NITI, recently said that Aadhaar, which is India's foundational digital identity program, has saved India $29 billion US. If you ask the country, according to the Government Accounting Office, the program cost no more than $1.5 billion. This is an ROI of 15 to 1. If you believe it, if you think there's a fudge, but it's still phenomenal, 15 to 1, even at 10 to 1, even at 5 to 1. So apart from identity being a right, it seems like it's a good business proposition. So why is it that governments are not clamoring to invest in it? Why isn't it that cabinets are all saying, we need to put a budget to build ID systems because we see a return on investment? Do you think this value proposition is not understood in Africa?
I strongly agree with you on this, that most of our governments in Africa do not understand how digital ID is important. They only consider it as just an ordinary identification number or card. They fail to realize that it is the foundational ID of building our society, and it is also key to the success of our society. So what we should do at this point is to ensure that we continue to create awareness that our foundational ID is key to whatever we do in our countries, whether in education, whether in health, whether in security, whether in agri, whether in whatever we do, that foundational ID is key, is a prerequisite to our success. I think creating awareness is key. And I will give you an example. When NIMSI was not under our supervision in Nigeria, they were being confronted with so many challenges here and there. When NIMSI was transferred to our supervision, within a month, I engaged the president of my country to show to him how important digital ID was. He listened to me attentively. We discussed the issue extensively, and I immediately directed the DG NIMSI to come up with their immediate challenges. He came up with a report requesting a huge amount of money to be given, which at that time was around 25 billion naira. I presented the request before the Federal Executive Council. There and then it was approved. And since the establishment of NIMSI in 2007, I think when it comes to internal issues, it was the highest amount of money they have ever received. Why? Because of that engagement and convincing your principals about how important digital ID is to your country. Secondly, there are other opportunities that can complement that. In Nigeria, what we did in order to facilitate the process, we made digital ID number as a prerequisite to even purchasing your SIM card. Just to make a phone call, you need it. And in order to somehow democratize the process, we approved licensing some federal and public and private institutions to support government when it comes to enrollment. 203 institutions were granted that license to enroll citizens based on the template and framework set up by NIMSI. That is what actually facilitated the process. And in addition, government is in the process of also obtaining another loan from World Bank, which we do hope that by 2025, the country will be able to have a complete database. So there are so many opportunities that can be explored in order to achieve that. Now, financing from government, allowing private institutions to come and support government, even through their corporate social responsibility,
transaction
like the
also.
telecommunications industry and many more, and even obtaining loan when it becomes necessary.
Okay. Now, if I put myself in the shoes of the finance minister or the president or the prime minister, and they ask you, Mr. Minister, can you tell us what do you think the return on investment, forget about identity being a right, what do you think the economic value of identity is to our country in terms of return on investment? Are we getting to that level of discussion in cabinets, or it's still too early?
The return on investment cannot be quantifiable.
Okay.
Firstly, digital ID is a prerequisite to getting your security right. If you look at the developed countries like in the US, you cannot go and start working without obtaining your social security number. I live in the United Kingdom. You cannot work for a day without having national insurance number. Another example you have given here of Aadhaar in India, Nadra in Pakistan, for example.
Right.
I work in the Middle East. Before teaching in a university, I had to obtain my Iqama number. So that one is key even to your security. And security is the primary responsibility of each and every government. So when an issue, an effort will support your security, then there is no way you can quantify that, because it is beyond that. Saving a life of one citizen through that effort, there is no way you can quantify in monetary terms.
Okay.
Number two, without having a national database, government will just continue making assumptions. And that assumption could be right and it could be wrong. Right. Today, in many African countries, there is no complete database. Okay. The best database you can obtain maybe 90% okay, but most of them do not have a complete database. So you will see making an assumption of population by plus minus 10%. You cannot continue to make that assumption. Plus minus 10% in Nigeria, for example, could be up to 20 million people, which is a population of another country. So if you make that assumption in your education or in your agriculture, then by implication, there is a waste in that. So by having the national database, you will be able to come up with your national plan with precision and accuracy without making unnecessary assumptions.
So basically, if I to rephrase what you said, it's not about a return on investment in terms of monetary, even though we know that will come because it will stimulate the economy. Yeah. It is about governments taking responsibility to doing their job right, which is building the infrastructure to service their people.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's leave it at that. I think that's a good way, a good vision to explain. I have two quick questions for you because we're going to run out of time. One of them is, as you know, digital identity is not about importing technology from the outside. It's about developing local capacity. It's about developing the knowledge, making knowledge transfer. What are you doing, or the government of Nigeria is doing, to encourage the development of capacity in Nigeria?
We have so many policies in place to encourage that. Firstly, in Nigeria, in whatever we do, either within the digital ID ecosystem or outside, we give priority and preference to our indigenous technology. For example, the acting president of Nigeria on the 1st of May 2017 signed an executive order on the local content patronage. Also, the president of Nigeria on 12th of February 2018 signed another presidential order directing government institutions to give priority and preference to our indigenous technology in products and also in services. These two laws in place show to you how we give priority and preference to our indigenous technology. Secondly, in order to create more awareness when it comes to digital ID, I think based on the report I have received from the National Identity Management Commission, Nigeria is the first country in the world to commemorate National ID Day.
Yes, of course.
We are the first country in the world. And I think we deserve commendation here.
Absolutely.
And
another
round of applause.
Another round of applause. Yes. You have been a very, very strong supporter of September 16, and we're hoping the rest of the African countries will follow suit. I'm glad you made that plug, because that was actually one of my other questions that I wanted to ask you about.
That is very important. So you may wish to ask the question so that I can elaborate further. And furthermore, even in NIMSI today, in Nigerian digital ID ecosystem, we have so many indigenous solutions.
Yeah.
Firstly, for example, as it is today, the enrollment institutions are all local companies. The 203 institutions we have licensed so far are all indigenous companies.
Yeah.
Two, the solutions we have been adopting, like the applications.
And tokenization.
The tokenization, for example, is an indigenous solution.
Right.
For example, the tab we are using for the enrollment, where you can enroll people even in a community where there is no broadband penetration, so that you can enroll them. When you get connected, you update your record. Right. They are indigenous solutions. So most of the facilities we are using today are indigenous solutions. Yeah. And if you look at the success we are recording in deploying indigenous solutions, is really amazing. And furthermore, there are government policies to support that. Recently, the federal government has approved the national policy for the promotion of indigenous content in the telecommunications sector. And that policy is another effort in order to support the development of our indigenous product in the country.
So it's really showing that paying attention to building local capacity allows the countries to become sovereign, allows the countries to develop essentially their own freedom to make changes, to innovate. We will be talking in segment 4 about the tokenization application with DG Aziz, which is now being looked at by many, many countries around the world, including developed countries, as a model for empowering people to use their digital ID.
And it is an indigenous solution.
It's an indigenous solution, exactly. It's an example.
And what is important for African countries to understand, we will not be able to strengthen our economy without making a deliberate effort to ensure that we produce what we consume and we consume what we produce. This is very important. In each and every sector, let us ensure that the significant percentage of what we need is being produced locally. And that is one of the most efficient ways of supporting our economy to grow.
Okay, Professor Pantami, we're running out of time, but there's one thing that I know the audience often asked me about that I want to direct to you. It could be somewhat political, so you can tell me this is not something we want to discuss. And it has to do with the idea that many countries, including in Nigeria, the electoral commissions seem to be hesitant to allow the foundational ID system to provide identity. They feel the foundational ID system is run by the government, it's not an independent commission, and as such, they don't trust that the government is not going to bias it. INEC continues to build their own database. They are at now 83 or 84 million as well. How do you see harmonization between the two, if any?
I think the best way to resolve the issue is through engagement. And number two, there is no database today in Nigeria that will replace the NIMSI database, because by law, only NIMSI is supposed to provide that national identity to our citizens. Whether any electoral body has its own database or not, that will not in any way replace the database with the National Identity Management Commission. Furthermore, based on the provision of our law in Nigeria, that is NIMSI Act 2007, if you look at Section 26 and 27 and Section 29, it is clearly stated that even for you to obtain voter's card to partake in election is not allowed without having this valid national ID number.
But so far, they have been doing it without it.
I'm coming.
Okay.
Why, if you look at Electoral Act, for example, Electoral Act that has recently been amended, it allows the use of a driver's license, passport, and the same national identity. But if you go to NIMSI Act 2007, Section 26 and 27, it's also stated that you cannot obtain passport and driver's license without NIN. So by implication, whoever has his own passport is being assumed that he has his own digital ID, because digital ID is written on our passport. And whoever obtains driver's license is assumed that he already has his own national ID. Why? Because the number is also written on it. Today in Nigeria, you cannot obtain passport without it.
But why do they need to enroll biometrics once again? Shouldn't NIMSI be the only entity that is enrolling biometrics in the country?
NIMSI is allowed
to
approve. No, NIMSI has been allowed by law to approve government institutions to obtain biometric. But as the regulatory body, they have to set up the standard for the enrollment.
And they set it for INEC or no? INEC
they have power to do that. There is no doubt about this. This is not questionable at all.
Okay.
They have power to do that.
Okay.
NIMSI has power to do that.
Okay, so basically the identity authority should be in the business of establishing standards and empowering others if they want to collect biometrics and biometric data and identity data to follow a national standard, which means by defining it, by default, it will be harmonized.
Yes.
Right now, we're dealing with a hybrid situation because INEC has not existed at a time where NIMSI was a huge success that it is today.
And we're in the process of harmonizing the database, including bank verification number.
Right.
We have collected 15 million, and we have verified that. Now we're in the process of collecting another around 25 million again from the Central Bank of Nigeria. So NIMSI has power to harmonize all the existing databases in the country.
Minister, I enjoyed our conversation. Unfortunately, time ran out, and I want to thank you once again. Please join me in thanking the Minister for
however, you didn't ask me about that question.
Oh, you want me to ask you again about September 16th?
Maybe later.
Okay.
But I'm glad that you have appreciated Nigeria as the first country.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, all.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's our pleasure.
Okay, we are going to continue with the second segment. That way. We're going to continue with the second segment where we look at greenfield initiatives. Actually, I will let the technical staff change the decor on the stage. Please affect the changes. We're going to look at greenfield initiatives from Morocco, Ethiopia, and the Philippines. All three are building identity programs, some functional, some foundational, without having to deal with legacy constraints. And all three of them are using sort of an open source, for example, MOSIP. We're going to listen and see what choices they are making and what their experience has been thus far. We'll have 3 short presentations, then followed by question and answers. I want to give the priority to the audience. So please prepare your questions for each speaker, but hold them until after all 3 have finished their brief presentations. Okay? Can we get the change, please, on the stage? While they're trying to find the people who are in charge of the change on stage, I will call upon the speakers, Omar Al-Alami from the Ministry of Interior, Yodahe ZEMICHAEL from the Office of the Prime Minister in Ethiopia. Omar is from Ministry of Interior, Morocco. And then Rene MENDOZA from the Statistics Authority in the Philippines. They all have very interesting programs. Please come join me on the stage, even though we don't have the chairs yet. They're somewhere are being delivered. Okay. Omar. Merci beaucoup. Yodahe. Merci. Rene. Merci. Okay. No, straight line in this case. Straight line, straight line. Actually, Omar, comme vous allez commencer, no, just put them straight line. No, just straight. Comme ça. Okay. I apologize for changing decor. This is not habitual, but we need that. Omar, you're going to start with your presentation, so when you're ready.
Présentation. Oui, bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Bonjour tout le monde. Donc, heureux et honoré d'être parmi vous et de vous présenter l'expérience marocaine. Je commence par remercier Monsieur le Président, Monsieur Atick, ainsi que toute l'audience, et d'être honoré effectivement de présenter l'expérience marocaine concernant l'identification. Donc, en fait, l'idée, effectivement, le segment, il concerne, j'allais dire, les systèmes en herbe. Mais effectivement, la présentation se présentera beaucoup plus également sur tous les systèmes d'identification qui se trouvent au Maroc. Et en fait, je parlerai beaucoup plus, puisqu'en fait, je suis au ministère de l'Intérieur. Effectivement, c'est un ministère de la population, donc à différentes étapes de la vie. Nous sommes appelés effectivement à répondre à certains besoins qui font que normalement ça nous donne j'allais dire la possibilité également de pouvoir retrouver j'allais dire de répondre à certains besoins par rapport en fait par rapport à un système d'identification que nous avons mis en place. Donc pour avancer. Juste pour le prochain slide. Merci. Donc, rapidement, mon intervention se focalisera sur 4 points. Le premier, comme je disais, que l'identification, c'est beaucoup plus un besoin à différents moments de la vie. Donc, juste pour dire que l'identification, on n'identifie pas juste pour identifier, mais on identifie pour satisfaire la population. C'est beaucoup plus pour répondre à des besoins à un certain usage important. Le deuxième point, en fait, c'est de parler par rapport à ces systèmes d'identification qui existent, il y a beaucoup de communs, beaucoup de mutualisation et beaucoup de capitalisation. Donc, il y a une grande harmonie créée autour de ça. Par la suite, en fait, rapidement, ça va être une présentation brève des systèmes d'identification, juste pour vous mettre dans le bain par rapport à ça, et de parler également de la coordination. Je m'attarderai beaucoup plus sur le registre national de la population, comme l'a dit M. Joseph, qui est en fait également basé sur un noyau MOSIP et effectivement qui est sur l'open source. Et en fait, j'allais dire, c'est le produit le plus jeune qui est aujourd'hui en pilote. Donc, slide suivant. Merci. Donc, on passe. Prochain slide. Voilà. Donc, juste là, on illustre que l'identification, c'est un besoin comme je le disais, qui est ressenti à différents moments de la vie. Et par rapport à ça, au Maroc, nous avons identifié quatre moments importants. On commence par l'état civil. Donc, dès la naissance, les personnes ont besoin d'être identifiées, enregistrées pour pouvoir les servir pour tout ce qui est vaccination, pour tout ce qui va venir après par rapport aux services rendus, par rapport à la scolarisation, et ainsi de suite. Et en fait, j'allais dire, la journey is continuing. Donc, on continue tout le long de la vie avec le mariage, le décès, peut-être le changement de nom, etc. Donc, tout ça fait que l'état civil, c'est quelque chose qui nous accompagne pendant toute la vie. Un deuxième moment, c'est la carte nationale d'identité électronique. Donc, cette carte, il devient indispensable à l'âge de 12 ans. On a entendu tout à l'heure Monsieur le ministre nigérien lorsqu'il parlait de l'exigence d'avoir la carte pour obtenir d'autres documents. En fait, c'est le cas du passeport. Lorsqu'on a besoin d'avoir un passeport qui est biométrique au niveau du Maroc, on a besoin, en fait, à partir de 12 ans, de disposer d'une carte nationale et on capitalise sur les empreintes qui sont déjà existantes sur la carte pour pouvoir les reconduire sur le passeport. À l'âge de 16 ans, selon la nouvelle loi de la carte, il devient exigible pour tous les Marocains de disposer d'une carte nationale biométrique, électronique, qui doit permettre effectivement par la suite de servir la population et permettre son accès à plusieurs services. Le passeport biométrique également pour le besoin de voyager, donc à l'étranger on en a besoin, donc c'est quelque chose qui est volontaire et facultatif, mais en fait au besoin de voyager on en a besoin. Et finalement le registre national de la population, si maintenant il y a besoin de bénéficier des programmes sociaux. En fait, on va voir par la suite que en fait, c'est quelque chose qui est là, pas pour présenter une contrainte, mais beaucoup plus pour une meilleure inclusion de la population. Et le RNP, c'est un registre qui s'adresse à toute la population marocaine, aussi bien marocaine qu'étrangère, qui réside au Maroc depuis la naissance et jusqu'à différents âges. Et en fait, également, il permet d'accéder les programmes sociaux. Donc, je passe, prochain slide, merci, on passe. Donc, comme je disais, l'autre slide, il y a plusieurs coordinations et plusieurs points en commun entre ces systèmes-là. Donc, à commencer que tous ces systèmes d'identification, ils sont encadrés par des lois. Donc, rien ne se fait en dehors de la loi. Et en fait, ce qu'on a dit tout à l'heure et ce qu'on a dans l'intervention qui a précédé de Monsieur le ministre, on a parlé de la protection des données personnelles. Donc, au Maroc, c'est la loi 0908 existe depuis 2008 et en fait sur laquelle nous sommes en train de construire toutes les autres lois qui concernent l'identification, l'identité, le partage des données et tout ce qui en suit. En fait, c'est quelque chose qui est vraiment dedans. Et en plus de ça, lorsqu'on veut en fait collecter de l'information plus tard, etc., on a besoin de passer par la CNDP, la Commission nationale de protection des données, qui autorise par rapport à chaque acte à part pour donner la possibilité en fait, et l'autorisation de pouvoir collecter l'information, bien sûr en respectant tout un process qui est mis en place. Le deuxième point commun, c'est que tous ces systèmes-là adoptent la digitalisation pour simplifier la prise en charge des usagers. Je rappelle qu'en fait, on va voir par la suite, il y a des systèmes, par exemple, l'état civil, il a commencé dès 1915, ça veut dire ça fait plus d'un siècle. Mais en fait, c'est un système qui est resté et qui a évolué et qui s'est modernisé et qui continue toujours à s'adapter en fonction des besoins, en fonction de l'écosystème, etc. Donc, en fait, la digitalisation, c'est une doctrine, c'est quelque chose qui est là, qui existe et qui est adopté par l'ensemble de ces systèmes. La troisième composante, c'est que tous ces systèmes-là, ils s'ouvrent sur leur écosystème de l'administration pour offrir le service d'identification et quelquefois de l'authentification également. Je rappelle qu'au Maroc, on a une loi récente, la loi 55-19, de simplification des procédures. Et il y a un article très important qui dit que, en fait, si quelqu'un présente des documents à une administration X, il ne devait pas le présenter une deuxième fois à une administration Y. Donc, charge à l'administration de pouvoir communiquer. Ça veut dire nous avons un OneGov et en fait, l'information, il est donnée une seule fois et en fait, cette information doit pouvoir circuler. Cet article et ce principe important, il a fait de sorte que ces systèmes identitaires, ils étaient appelés davantage à s'ouvrir sur leur écosystème pour offrir ce service d'identification et d'authentification et d'éviter de sorte à ce que le citoyen commence à faire le parcours entre les administrations pour donner la même information plusieurs fois. Et en fait, là, le quatrième point, c'est que ces systèmes-là, ils fonctionnent en parfaite coordination, on va le voir, ils mutualisent, ils se complètent, et tout cela, en fait, au profit de l'usager. Donc, prochain slide. Merci. Prochain. Donc là, on commence à dérouler, je pense, rapidement, système par système, et en fait, on va voir que tous les principes dont j'ai parlé tout à l'heure, on va les retrouver. L'état civil, comme je disais, ça constitue la base de l'identité au Maroc. C'est le système de base qui date de plus d'un siècle, comme je disais, depuis 1915. En fait, il a connu une évolution pour élargir son périmètre, pour adresser plusieurs types de populations. Et en fait, à partir de 2018, on a créé le registre national de l'état civil, le RNEC. Donc, il a commencé en pilote à Rabat et par la suite sur toute la région de Rabat, Salé, Kenitra, Casablanca. Et en fait, on est en train de continuer. Et en fait, ce qu'on est en train de faire, c'est que toutes les nouvelles naissances, ils sont enregistrés dans le système. En parallèle, nous travaillons sur la récupération de tous les archives, de tous les registres qui existent. Et on a compté plus quelque chose comme 50 millions d'actes à reprendre dans le système pour avoir ce RNEC qui inclut aussi bien les nouveaux que le passif qui existait. Par rapport à cela, et on va le voir, c'est un point commun, nous avons un portail de services orienté aux citoyens qui leur permet déjà de pouvoir procéder et démarrer les actes, j'allais dire, de déclaration de naissance, d'obtention de documents. C'est le portail halamadania.ma. Et en fait qui offre un ensemble de services au profit des citoyens. Donc je passe le prochain slide. Le deuxième système dont j'ai parlé, c'est la carte nationale électronique, la CNI. En fait, il constitue le titre identitaire exigible à tout citoyen marocain. Donc c'est l'identité des Marocains, c'est la carte nationale. Elle-même, la carte, il se base, parmi les documents de base qui sont demandés, c'est les documents qui sont fournis par l'état civil. Et là, en fait, on identifie les passerelles que nous pouvons mettre en place et qui permettent de continuer cette mutualisation et de simplifier le parcours citoyen. Donc, la carte, on peut noter des moments importants. C'est qu'en 2007, on a assisté à la version de la carte d'identité nationale électronique qui a fonctionné en fait jusqu'à 2020. Là, on assiste à la CNI 2.0 qui offre des services d'authentification et d'identification IKUC multimode. Donc, je dirais que c'est une fierté pour le Maroc. Et aujourd'hui, en fait, à travers cette carte-là, il y a également la création et le lancement, ça a été fait, je pense, au courant de cette année, de la plateforme d'identité numérique et en fait qui permet également d'offrir des services d'authentification et d'identification. Et il y a autour de ça tout un écosystème d'administration, ce qui permettra de simplifier les parcours usagers pour les citoyens. Bien sûr, il y a le portail également CNI.ma qui permet de déposer la demande et qui permet également de se préinscrire, et également de pouvoir faire le suivi de traitement de sa demande. Donc je passe l'autre site ou l'autre produit, c'est le passeport biométrique dont j'ai parlé tout à l'heure. Donc c'est le titre national de voyage personnel, donc il est exigible, c'est l'identité des Marocains lorsqu'ils sont à l'étranger, à l'extérieur du Maroc. En 2009, donc, je parlerai d'un jalon important, c'est l'adoption de la version du passeport biométrique. En fait, il se conforme aux normes de l'ONECI et ce qui lui permet d'offrir une interopérabilité mondiale, une reconnaissance à l'échelle internationale et la possibilité également de faciliter les procédures d'enregistrement et de passer les frontières pour les Marocains une fois qu'ils sont à l'étranger ou sur les aéroports ou sur les frontières. Donc, il y a une deuxième version qui a vu le jour en 2019. Il y a un événement important, c'était la dématérialisation du timbre. Vous savez que pour obtenir un passeport, il y a besoin de payer un timbre. Depuis 2019, ce timbre, il est devenu électronique. Et en fait, ça a permis, c'était également une clé qui a permis déjà de pouvoir en fait dématérialiser la procédure d'obtention du passeport. Et aujourd'hui, il se fait en ligne. La demande, il se fait en ligne. L'achat du timbre, il se fait en ligne. Et en fait, par la suite, en fait, on continue jusqu'à l'obtention du passeport physique. Actuellement, les équipes travaillent sur une version, j'allais dire, de totalement dématérialisée et qui capitalise également sur les services qui sont offerts par l'ACNI 2.0 pour complètement digitaliser le parcours. Donc, nous avons également un portail, passeport.ma, qui permet le dépôt de la demande et qui permet également la possibilité de faire le suivi. Je passe. Le dernier, en fait, c'est le registre national de la population, donc c'est le plus jeune. Comme je disais, c'est un registre pour tous les individus au Maroc, marocains et étrangers. Donc, à chaque personne inscrite, on lui attribue un IDCS. Je rappelle que ce même IDCS, il est attribué pour les nouveau-nés lorsqu'ils s'inscrivent au niveau de l'état civil. Et là, c'est une coordination qui est établie pour que, à terme, tous les Marocains auront un IDCS dès la naissance. Et en fait, cet IDCS, il va être reconduit dans le RNP. Et par rapport à Mozip, je peux dire que c'est parmi les particularités du Maroc, c'est qu'en fait, nous puisons à partir d'un générateur qui sert plus d'un programme social et qui permet, en fait, à un moment donné, de ne pas se retrouver avec plusieurs identifiants. Donc, l'inscription au RNP est facultative et n'est pas obligatoire, mais il le devient lorsque les personnes veulent accéder aux programmes sociaux. Avant d'accéder à un programme social, nous avons un registre des ménages qui se constitue sur la base des individus et des IDCS, et c'est le registre social unifié. Donc, aujourd'hui, en fait, on travaille en pilote à Rabat, à Kenitra. Jusqu'à hier, on a enregistré quelques 133 000 IDCS qui sont attribués. Nous continuons en fait l'expérience. Nous nous préparons à la généralisation qui va commencer en fait à partir du 4e trimestre de cette année. On espère, Inch'Allah, pouvoir finir durant la fin de l'année pour que le système soit déployé partout avec des chiffres qui vont nous permettre déjà de couvrir plusieurs tranches de population jusqu'à couvrir l'ensemble des personnes qui sont concernées par les programmes sociaux. Et je peux vous dire que le RNP, il offre deux services de base, l'inscription et l'obtention de l'IDCS qui est obligatoire pour l'ensemble des programmes sociaux et ça crée l'interopérabilité entre ces programmes. Et le deuxième, il offre également pour ces programmes sociaux l'identification, ça veut dire simplifier la vie à travers le IKUC qui est offert pour ne pas redemander les mêmes données une deuxième fois. Et également, il offre l'authentification forte qui permet effectivement de tracer les personnes qui sont derrière leur machine et qui veulent accéder à des programmes. Donc, dernier point, et je conclus, dernier slide. Voilà, donc juste pour parler de la coordination. Nous avons parlé de 4 systèmes. Rapidement, le RNEC, le Registre national de la population, il assure une communication avec l'ACNI. À travers ça, il y a une demande de fiabilisation des données, notamment les personnes qui sont déclarées des décès, avant de confirmer que quelqu'un, en fait, et c'est bien la personne qui est introduite dans le système. Donc, il y a un échange qui se fait automatiquement avec l'ACNI. on atteste à travers la CNI que c'est la bonne personne, et par la suite, nous échangeons avec la CNI pour dire cette personne est déclarée dans l'état civil comme décédée. La même chose, en fait, le RNEC, il communique avec le RNP, avec le Registre national de la population, puisque la génération d'IDCS, c'est une génération qui est concertée, et il y a la fiabilisation des données. Ça veut dire aujourd'hui, toute personne qui s'inscrit dans le RNP, on fait un recoupement automatique, et ça, c'est une deuxième particularité du Maroc par rapport à l'utilisation de MOSIP, c'est que, en fait, nous avons intégré la possibilité de pouvoir faire parler les systèmes qui existaient auparavant et de faire des recoupements. Également, la CNI, il communique avec le passeport pour tout ce qui est en fait échange de données et récupération des empreintes digitales. Voilà, et en fait, et l'expérience continue. Et c'est tout. Je vous remercie. J'espère ne pas être long.
Merci beaucoup. Once again, please hold your questions for Omar. Anything you want to know, we're going to come back to the question and answer period. Now we're going to continue with Ethiopia, with Yodahe, ZEMICHAEL.
Bienvenue, mesdames et messieurs. My French stops there. From here, it's English. So welcome, Excellency Ministers. I also welcome our brothers, our government officials from different African countries, international development organizations, and technology providers for creating this excellent session. ID4Africa is very important to us for the Ethiopian program because we have learned a lot, especially from the last session in South Africa. It's where we actually made some key decisions that guided us in the years following. So thank you for coming. So I'll make a brief presentation about the Ethiopian Digital ID. My name is Yodahe. I'm the Executive Director of the Digital ID program in Ethiopia. I have here with me the Moroccans and the Filipino brothers, as well as we've learned a lot from them in the last couple of years. We are relatively newcomers. We launched our pilot last year in 2021. The good thing about being a latecomer is that you have the latecomer advantage, so you learn from the others who have done it for many years. Yeah, okay, next slide. So first, let me speak about what we do. What we do is a foundational identification system to support all use cases. It's not particularly focused on one particular use case. It's not just the finance sector or the agriculture sector or the social benefit sector, but we're here to serve all use cases. Ethiopia has a legacy system. We're not new to the idea of foundation, an identification system. Roughly between 60 and 70% of all citizens in Ethiopia have something we call the Kabale ID, which is paper-based, but it serves as a foundational ID. It's like a resident ID card, but it's not digital. That's one of the drawbacks of the Kabale ID. So we're here to make sure that we have a digital foundational ID system. The WHO is all residents of Ethiopia, so we also include non-citizens as well. The target is by 2025. It's not very ambitious. It's a little bit relaxed. By 2025, we plan to issue 70 million plus digital IDs. How we plan to do it is through deploying a system of onboarding and through using use cases that actually have the need for digital ID. We are in line with the national plans. We have a 10-year development plan, an Ethiopian 10-year development plan. We are also in line with the 2025 Digital Ethiopia strategy. So we're basing our plans and our targets, our milestones based on these national plans. Principles we endorse the sustainable identification principles that's put forth by the United Nations and the World Bank. Are the key principles that we endorse, including in our draft legal law. We have inclusion in privacy. we leave no one behind is a key principle that we follow. One of the drawbacks of our legacy identification system, it has a lot of barriers to entry. There is requirements. You have to have produce either a title deed, either your landlord has to come in and testify for you. So all those are barriers to entry. So a lot of people, a good segment of the population, is unable to get an ID. So we want to change that. So leave no one behind is one principle. The other one is it has to be a dependable solution. A lot of business continuity, the finance sector, the insurance, health, education, a lot of sectors will depend on us. That means no system failure is not an option. So it has to be a really dependable solution. It has to be distributed in a sense that there is no single point of failure. The third one is governance. We have to have oversight. We have to have transparency and accountability. We're also working on a legal document which gives us the legal basis to do two things. The first one is it gives us a mandate to collect biometric data. The second one is it also enables the individual. It gives the individual the right of ownership, this issue of data privacy and protection. And then it also touches upon consent. So our vision is to build a sustainable digital ID, supporting all use cases and residents by 2025. Objective is to prove identity in which all citizens and regular residents of Ethiopia will be part of. The motto, it's a work in progress. We have the Amharic version, which is it sounds good to the ears, but the English, it basically says, I'm unique and there is no one else like me. That's our motto.
Why don't you say it in the original?
In English, it means one person is unique.
Okay.
It sounds better in our language.
Okay.
That's how it is.
This is poetic.
Yeah. And data sets, as one of our principles is minimization of data. We don't collect unnecessary data that's not necessary to the core of our business, which is identifying people. So we only collect data that's necessary to our business. So we have very limited demographic data that we collect. The mandatory ones are the ones listed here in number 1. We also collect proof supporting documents that says you are who you say you are. And in case there is no supporting document, to be inclusive, we also accept witnesses. We accept, and finally, biometrics is mandatory. We collect 3 modalities, 10 fingerprints, iris, and facial. The reason is we need to do this in a very expedited manner. So 3 modalities are what we agreed on. The process flow, we have ID experts in this conference, so we're not going through one by one. Everybody knows this probably more than I do. But there is basically registration, and then there is validation, which is deduplication, is that person unique. Then the generation of the unique number, we call it the FIDA number. Then there is a delivery mechanism to the individual of the generated unique number. Right now, we are in a pilot stage, so we only send SMS and email, but we're working on a postal delivery mechanism with the National Post Office. And then finally, and most importantly, is the authentication part, which is going to be the core of our operation, the eKYC. Technology, similar to my compatriots here, Philippines and Morocco, we're using an open source platform. Obviously, when someone says open source, the first question that comes to mind is it secure? Yes, it's secure. We've tested it in the past. We've been working on MOSIP since 2020. In fact, since 2019, the first time we hear of it was in Johannesburg, South Africa. So since then, we've been testing it of our own will and volition. So during the pilot phase, we've been working on the MOSIP, we call it FIDA IDMS. And since then, it's proven itself that we have had a local system integration team, and they have been comfortable with it. We've been able to customize it. So there is also the issue of system ownership, which is very important to us. Not depending, the issue of data sovereignty. So due to those reasons, vendor neutrality as well. We like all the vendors. We love technology providers because it's important to work closely with international cutting-edge technology providers, but at the same time, there needs to be a neutrality. So that's the reason why we have chosen it. We've done an in-house customization. By the way, the word FIDA it's an interesting word. Ethiopia has at least 5 to 6 major languages, all of which has the same meaning for this word. And if you speak Swahili or Arabic or Hindi, it's most probably you would know what this means. FIDA means value. So we chose the name for our ID system, and we also chose it for the unique number we generate because it gives you value. So the system integration team, one interesting aspect is that we have chosen an in-house system integration team. We're still on a pilot, so there remains to be seen if we have the capacity needed to push through. But right now we're working in this direction. We've also localized it language-wise, security-wise, also made sure that it complies with our legal framework. We've also tested it in the pilot. So our milestone, as I mentioned earlier, by end of 2025, we plan to hit 70 million. We have 3 major enrollment channels. As we learned from our Nigerian brothers, it's good to outsource the onboarding. It should not just be the national ID program that's doing the onboarding. So we are working towards including private sectors, government agencies, national entities to help us with the onboarding. It could be the telecom, the mobile network operators, could be the post offices, it could be the banks, as well as private sector, small agencies that would help us with the onboarding. So we have 3 different channels for the onboarding. I'm trying to keep to time.
Yes.
So if you have more questions, we have links on our website. You can just Google ID Ethiopia and you'll find our website, and we have most of our documents up there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Excellent. Okay, let's continue to the last presentation in this segment before we take audience questions. And this is from Rene MENDOZA from the Statistics Authority of Philippines.
Okay, 67 million. That's the number of Filipinos currently enrolled in our PhilSys, or the Philippine Identification System. So in this presentation, I'm going to give you a brief overview of what the Philippine ID system is all about, and also just to give you some insights on how we were able to reach 67 million Filipinos enrolled into our system in such a short time. Hi, my name is Rene MENDOZA. I'm from the Philippine Statistics Authority. I'm an assistant national statistician. Don't be fooled by the name. I'm not a statistician, but rather an engineer that heads the service that handles the information systems and cybersecurity of PhilSys. Next slide, please. So the PhilSys provides for the valid identification of Filipinos and resident aliens through the PhilID card and the PhilSys number, or PSN. So how did PhilSys come about? So before PhilSys, actually up to now, we have a lot of functional IDs, 25 exactly. And these systems are non-interoperable, and all of them do not even provide online authentication. Digitalization is quite low. In the most recent IMD World Digital Competitiveness Ranking, the Philippines is number 58 out of 64 countries that are ranked. Financial inclusion leaves much to be desired. In the most recent survey by the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, the Central Bank of the Philippines, this is in 2019, we have only about 21 million Filipinos with bank accounts, and we're talking about a population of 111 million. And lastly, in terms of social protection delivery, this is still a challenge for us. At the height of the COVID pandemic era, most of the process is still very manual and prone to graft. And so because of these various reasons, it became the catalyst for the birth of the PhilSys. Next slide, please. So the target of PhilSys is to make the the national ID as widely available as possible to all our residents so that they can easily, securely, and efficiently transact with the government and private entities. I will just name 3 peculiarities of our national ID. First, the ID has a lifetime validity. Second, the PhilID card is free for Filipinos, at least for the first issuance. And then lastly, we do not collect the signatures of our residents. We believe that the signature do not actually add any value to the ID, and we have other ways of reliably authenticating them. We use OTP and biometric authentication. Next slide, please. So in terms of numbers, so for this year, the cumulative target for enrolling Filipinos is 92 million. Currently, we're at 67 million now, and we have done this for about 1.5 years. Last year, we reached our target. For a year, we reached the 50 million target. So if you go down the bottom, you will notice that in terms of card distribution, the target is roughly only about 31.3 million, but you can see that we've only distributed 12 million cards. So the trend here is that the numbers are shrinking, and basically the main reason is that we're experiencing some bottlenecks in terms of card printing and card distribution. In my last slide, I will be discussing some interventions on how to actually improve the situation. Next slide. So circling back to the PSN or PhilSys number, this is a unique 12-digit number that we assign to our citizens. It cannot be used for transactions. It must be kept private, and it's actually microprinted on our PhilID card. So you cannot see this without actually using a magnifying glass. So if this PSN cannot be used for any transactions, how else could you use the ID, right? So we employ tokenization in this case, and we derive 3 different numbers from it. So the first one is the PCN, or the PhilSys card number. This is prominently printed on the card. We have the alias PSN, or alias or alias PSN. So this is basically just transactional PSNs. You can use this for certain transactions, and then they sort of expire. And then lastly, the back-end tokens. These can be used. These are also tokenized versions of the PSN. These can be used for integrating other applications and databases onto our system. Next slide. So I prepared here a diagram so that you can see what constitutes the technical, the different components that compose the technical architecture of the PhilSys. So you will notice at the heart of PhilSys, we have the MOSIP. It powers the most important aspects of the application. So this includes the registration client, the identity management system, PSN generation and tokenization, even authentication. But also you will notice there are still a lot of other components in there that are non-MOSIP. And this actually is a proof that using MOSIP makes the system extensible and make it easy for other systems to be integrated onto the system. The other thing I'd like to point out is that, in over a year of operation, we've seen a lot of slowdowns in certain aspects of the system. And because the MOSIP system is so scalable, we were able to just add more resources to the system and bring the performance to a level that we are very satisfied with. So in this setup, it's extensible and very scalable. Next slide, please. So because we collect so much sensitive personal information, the PSA prioritizes the privacy, security, and integrity of the registered person's data. As a matter of fact, we've applied privacy by design principles. This is, I think, very common across all national ID systems. We only collect minimal information. Data is encrypted in transit and at rest. The PhilSys number is fully randomized. It does not reveal any information about the person, specifically the date of birth. Even in the law, the PhilSys is mandated to comply with our National Data Privacy Act and other national policies related to cybersecurity. No other government agency should be able, or even an individual should be able to access our databases, and access to the data and processing usually will require user consent. Next slide, please. So this is the most important slide, I guess, for everyone who's interested, who want to know how we were able to do 67 million enrollments in such a short time. So the first two actually are the ones that really matter in this case. So the first one is that we have secured top management support. We have a council, not a council of elders, but actually a council of government agencies headed by the NEDA secretary. So it is through this council that we were able to secure the resources and the support so that we could do our job properly. More importantly, this council and even the agency that I come from, the Philippine Statistics Authority, we are a group of people who eat, live, and breathe numbers. These people refuse to make decisions and policies without data. So this is very important, and I like to highlight that because this played a key role when we were, fine-tuning the system. When we see that, certain aspects of the operation is causing some slowdowns, inefficiencies, and wastage, we were able to swiftly fix those concerns. So these two contributed greatly to the achievement of that 67 million number. On a more general note, I'd like to recommend that pilot launches and testing should, be strictly implemented to prevent surprises down the line. Believe you me, avoid the embarrassment and do not incur the wrath of your citizens if you do not do this properly. And then lastly, if I could just turn back time, I think I would recommend to my bosses to keep the number of vendors to a minimum. Project management is a headache for multiple vendor setup. Next slide. So these are just some pictures of the registration, and then the last slide. Next slide, please. Some items we're working on: pilot registration, the mobile application, and printable credentials. These we will use to sort of augment our card distribution. We want to release this immediately. And then lastly, the use cases. These are very important. We're partnering with the Department of Social Welfare and Development and the Department of Health for social protection and VAC certification. So in conclusion, we still have a long way to go. I'm sure we'll make a lot of mistakes, but with the help of the community, I'm pretty sure we will accomplish a lot of great things. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rene. So you've heard basically from 3 greenfield initiatives, and even though there were only 3, there is a lot of diverse positions. For example, Ethiopia loves vendors. Philippines loves to minimize vendors. So there's no one size fits all. There's no one approach. Really, you have to take into account your specifics. We have a little bit of time to take some questions to these 3 countries who have a greenfield initiative that they presented in front of you. Raise your hand, and somebody, an usher with a microphone, the gentleman on the right, please state your name, your organization, your country, and then state your question.
Hello, everybody. Hi, my name is Yash. I'm from Credence. Thank you, first of all, for all the information you're sharing. It's great to hear feedback from you, the real executing arm of this initiative. I just wanted to gather your thoughts on the authentication part of it. As you are getting all your citizens enrolled, how do you see authentication roll out in the both physical card and digital card world in your unique situations?
And this could be answered by anybody.
Absolutely.
Okay, anybody. How do you see authentication happening? You've been focusing on enrollment.
Right. So I think for the Philippines, we're still in the process of rolling those services out, the authentication. But really, I think the most important aspects that we need to consider, at least in the Philippine context, is because we are doing online authentication, so we need to ensure that the infrastructure is there. Broadband penetration should be very high. Secondly, I think most of the relying parties, the establishments that will be connecting to us, will be investing a little bit in terms of buying some authentication devices. But really, I think more than anything, I think there could be some interventions in there where we could reduce the barrier to entry to authentication. We have OTP, where it's possible to just integrate with us and authenticate with just a simple SMS and some demographic information.
Okay.
In our case, in Ethiopia's case, where the pilot is, we are integrating for online authentication with certain relying parties. We've so far integrated with certain banks and a few other service providers, one in the education sector.
So it's an API that you have made available?
Yes, we made an eKYC API available and they consume that API.
Yeah.
The other one is we are also preparing for offline authentication due to the obvious constraints in accessibility of online infrastructure.
And this will be a QR code that with
Yes.
some information you authenticate?
Digitally signed
Digitally
QR
signed.
code, yes.
Okay, Omar, ask.
Oui, en ce qui nous concerne au Maroc, effectivement, comme je l'ai dit tout à l'heure, c'est une expérience très jeune. On est en pilote, mais aujourd'hui, comme je le disais, le RNP, par exemple, le RNP, c'est la porte d'introduction au registre social unifié. Et ce qu'il faut retenir, c'est qu'aujourd'hui, le registre social unifié qui va être déployé dans quelques semaines, déjà, il se base sur l'authentification, ça veut dire on simplifie avec le eKYC et on utilise principalement l'OTP. Mais les autres modes, ils sont également prévus dans le futur. Et l'architecture du système, avec, on a 3 programmes pilotes qui peuvent utiliser également l'authentification et capitaliser sur ça. Principalement, sont sur l'OTP, mais les autres modes sont également possibles. Merci.
Merci, Omar. Other questions from the audience? Okay, we have quite a few. Actually, the gentleman in the middle before you and then after that you. Gentleman, microphone please, down here. Here's the usher. And then you pass the microphone to the lady on the front.
Yes, thank you very much.
Next to the Honorable Ruben.
I'm Atem Moral Biar, Director General of Nationality, Passport, Immigration, South Sudan. My question goes to the presenter from the Ethiopia, because the situation and our situation in South Sudan look the same. My question, how do you do enrollment in the areas of conflict and areas, remote areas where there is no road and access? Thank you.
So, yeah, you're right. In areas where there is a lack of connectivity or where there is access to roads, for instance, it's better to highly rely on more mobile registration kits and more mobile teams. Obviously, in areas where there is active conflict, it's better not to send your registration officials for security reasons. It's always best to make sure that to wait until the conflict is resolved. But for lack of access, it's better to rely on mobile teams. Biometrics sometimes requires indoors. It requires some, for lighting purposes, may not be easy to do it out in the sunlight, but it's still possible to do it out in the fields with certain additional gadgets.
But your model is to go to the population, not to bring the population to you. Is that correct?
Correct. Our strategy, the ID Ethiopia strategy, it's not geographic-based, but it's service sector-based.
Service sector-based.
So if it's a bank, then it's a bank that chooses go to this location, go to this other location. Mm-hmm. If it's a health center, the health center decides where they want it to happen. We just follow the leads of the relying parties or the service providers.
Okay, excellent. Let's keep going. The lady in the front, you had a question?
Thank you. My name is Immaculate Kasait, the Data Commissioner for Kenya. My question one is, I want to appreciate the presenters. Clearly, data protection has become a core issue. My question to the three of you is how you're working with the respective authorities on data protection. From your presentation, you spoke about the legal framework. It would be important to touch on it. The second touch, there are authorities, and particularly the network of Africa Data Protection Authorities. How are you working closely with that? Because given that we are all looking at ecosystem and making sure that the data which is personal you are collecting is safe, how will you make sure that indeed the information is protected? And the final one is to the doc, perhaps one of the themes for the next conference should be data protection. It continues to be a cross-cutting issue.
In fact, as you know, we cycle through the themes. And so we did go prior data protection in South Africa, where we'll be coming back to that next year in whoever country we end up in. Okay. Anybody wants to explain how you work with the data protection? Omar?
Donc, juste par rapport au cas du Maroc, comme je disais tout à l'heure, effectivement, la loi de protection de données existe depuis c'est la loi 0908, existe depuis 2008. Donc, c'est une donne que nous prenons en considération dès la conception. Ce que je peux dire, c'est que par rapport au MOSI, par exemple, nous sommes un système qui est hautement de protection et privacy by design. C'est quelque chose qui est intégré. Ça nous rend beaucoup plus la tâche facile. Et effectivement, nous étions en train de préparer la loi, ce que disait monsieur Joseph tout à l'heure, par rapport au cas du Maroc. Donc, lorsque nous étions en train de préparer la loi pour régir en fait le registre, il y avait déjà en fait pas mal d'éléments qui étaient intégrés, qui étaient déjà préparés, et c'est dès la conception qu'on a intégré ça. Donc, il n'y a pas eu beaucoup de difficultés. Par la suite, en fait, pour obtenir les autorisations pour chaque traitement de données, on ne se trouve pas être surpris par de nouvelles dispositions ou des contraintes, mais c'était pensé dès le départ. Et voilà, c'est facile.
Et vous travaillez en partenariat, je pense. Je ne sais pas si Omar Chaghrouchni, il est dans l'audience. Je ne vois pas, mais anyway. Anybody else want to contribute?
So on data protection, Maklit, if you go to our website, you can find the draft Personal Data Protection Proclamation. You can also find the draft ID law, both of which are articles concerning consent, privacy, etc. So we plan to address data protection through two different sets of proclamations.
And Philippines?
Okay, for the Philippines, we have a Data Privacy Act. It's already very established in 2012, so we have that. And the National Privacy Commission, the one that's the lead implementer for the Data Privacy Act, has a seat in the council that governs the implementation of PhilSys. So together with the National Privacy Commission, they're actively contributing to ensuring that when we implement PhilSys, data privacy
is there from the start. It's not an afterthought.
Correct.
Excellent. Professor Hammer.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Amanda Hammers, University of Copenhagen, and I lead a research project called Certifications of Citizenship in Africa, in Ghana and Uganda. So thank you very much for these amazing presentations, and I really respect the ambitions and the accomplishments of, including Nigeria, of course. My question is, in these plans that you have, there are periods of transition that don't seem to be taken or not visibly demonstrated, in the sense that there are millions of people that don't yet get put into the system when it's so very centralized. A card is absolutely a requirement even for a SIM card. An ID card is necessary for even that basic need. And yet, actually, in some cases, millions of people are in fact left behind in a transitional period. What are the measures and the responsibilities to make sure that those people are also included? Thank you.
Basically, if I understand the question of the professor correctly, in many cases, we are work in progress. When we are actually building systems and transitioning from one system to another, or there are people who are going to fall between the cracks. Does that mean that while these people are still outside the system, do you have a redundant or a manual process that allows them to still be included without having to wait for you to reach them through the modern and the updated system. I believe you two here are in a pilot phase, so you're not necessarily into that level, but maybe the Philippines is still has reached that point and they could address your question.
I'll try to answer that. So actually, I briefly touched on this. So a while ago, I mentioned that we were experiencing problems with card printing and card distribution. Really, the main issue here is that these are generally bottlenecks in an end-to-end system. You can only print so much in a day and distribute them all over the Philippines. So in fact, the problem is getting worse. We're getting a lot of negative feedback from social media. Where is my card? I've already enrolled a year before, and now it's still not delivered. And so we are thinking now, okay, because ultimately our ID is a digital ID.
Yes.
So first we're trying to change the message that even though we're still planning to provide physical IDs to everyone, the digital ID is still the most important one. It's just a number that you can get immediately. And the plan is to provide a mobile application and a printable credential. So I mentioned printable credential. Basically, the ID that you have on our system, once it's already generated, you can actually print it on a piece of paper and use that for authentication.
Yeah. I mean, you need to plan to build multiple channels.
Correct.
In order to be able to cover everybody, and some channels are lower risk channels. So you would use just a printed thing offline, or other things need online. So you really need to think about an ecosystem of authentication based on something that's the most fundamental thing, which is your national identity number that has been deduplicated and attests your existence. So I think there are lots of lessons here that can be learned and can be summarized. We will explore some of them in more specific details in future livecast episodes. So some of these gentlemen will come back to the livecast and will give us more updates in more details. I will allow for one more question, but it has to be a really burning question and has to be something that you really cannot live without having it asked. So anybody wants? Yes, this man is saying he cannot live without it. So please, down here. What's that? Unfortunately, my eye was looking in that direction. I'm sorry I didn't see you. So here's the burning question.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Bienvenu Irakoze from Burundi. I'm the responsible of a national ICT agency implementation project. First of all, thank you for all the presenters for their good presentation. And I have been interested by the principle or the policy from Morocco where they say no citizen need to share all the information everywhere he go to ask services.
Share once.
He share all once the information and he get every service he need without repeating the same process. But from our colleague, he says that they don't need to share data for the privacy and security. Agencies, they don't need to share data. So my questions, or what I would like to get more details or information clarifications, is to know how in Philippines is this every citizen repeat sharing the information everywhere he go, or how it's work since agencies, they don't need to share data for the private and security. I would like to get clarification.
There seems to be a contradiction in the sense that because of privacy, one agency is not allowed to share with another agency. Do you have something like X-Road or some other data sharing platform that within the law allows legitimate data sharing between agencies, with consent perhaps built in?
Our operation is basically based on with consent, where in fact, when you try to transact with, for instance, a bank, and that bank requires you to provide details. We have an eKYC actually, and you can, with the use of consent, you can provide information to that bank. When you go to another bank, these banks do not talk to each other. You will have to go through that same process again, where you have to provide user consent and provide the demographic data that you have from the FieldSys registry.
Okay, but you don't have a mechanism by which they can provide consent for you to release their information to somebody in the chain?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay.
Something to think about.
Something to think about. Very good question from Burundi. Okay, we're going to hold now the questions because we are going to move on to the third segment, which is on civil registration reform. Stay with us. I want you all to stay with us. This is going to be a very exciting set of segments, especially coming up with this reform, and then the segment 4, the practitioners, the seasoned people, the sort of the mature who has been around for 15 years, who are going to talk about what they're doing to keep their systems mature. So I'd say thank you very much for being with us. Very, very insightful presentations. I'd like to call the next panel on stage, Josephine, Christian KODIA. Thank you. Join me. Merci beaucoup. Merci. Merci. Bye. Okay. The next panel, please, Josephine. Josephine, you'll take the podium because you will be the first to start. Once again, I'll tell the speakers, please be brief so that we allow the audience to participate. The audience is very interested in asking you questions. So please make your presentation as brief as you can. Mr. KODIA from Côte d'Ivoire. Here he is. Voilà, monsieur. Josephine, the floor is yours. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much. Honorables and dear colleagues, thank you for following up on the... I'm going to talk about the service journey in Rwanda. So on the outline, we have our service improvement process, the governance of our service in Rwanda, the legal review, the project pillars that governed the service improvement system, the challenges that we encountered and how we mitigated them. Okay, we are still mitigating them, and the success factors as well as key enablers. So the improvement process in service in Rwanda started with an assessment of our service system because we had a very low, we had a high percentage of notification of events, but not the registration. So we wanted to look at what are the challenges or other key pain points and how we could solve them. So we came back with a coordination structure where we involved most of the ministries, because as I think in most of our countries, service events happen in a lot of ministries, across of ministries. So it's not only a job of one entity. So we wanted to see how to streamline this event, and also mostly looking into how to make it frictionless and painless to the citizen, so that they do not have to go repeat the same information across systems. So where we came up with a roadmap that it's almost the same as our colleagues in Morocco informed, where we came up with just inform once, register once, and you don't repeat it again. We also work with key stakeholders, especially on the service provision at the end, so that it will help us to increase the uptake, so we do not have to invest a lot in education. The education is actually implied, while, for example, for birth event, by requesting having a birth certificate to access social protection, it allowed automatically parents, when they leave the maternity, to register their newborn, and automatically they get their NIN, and automatically they are added to the household, and they can get medical services immediately while still at the maternity. So it helped us to reduce on coming up with a campaign to educate, you need to have a birth certificate, you need to register a newborn. It becomes a seamless registration process. And also, it also ultimately lead to the dissemination of vital statistics report and also inform especially our Ministry of Health, for example, on the new policies related to the death and cause of death. So the governance, our service governance in Rwanda is made at the highest level. We have ministers of the Ministry of Local Government, the Ministry of Gender and Family Promotion, because in Gender and Family Promotion, that's where we have most of the children-related events that are protected via the Ministry of Gender and Family Promotion. We have the Ministry of Justice for events that need to go to the court, and the Ministry of Health, because since the modernization of our civil registration, events are registered at the point where they happen. So the biggest two events, the birth and death, in Rwanda, birth occurs in health facility at above 95%. So by registering at the health facility, we do not make parents again have to move to the sector office to go register their newborn the way it was done before. We also have a service steering committee that is made of permanent secretaries of the above ministries, as well as director generals of institutions, including the National Identification Agency. We also have below it the service core technical team that is made of officers, directors, and agents in those above ministries, and also local government offices. And we have the National Mortality Committee. They are working today into the dissemination, for example, of the tablets for the cell officers for death occurring in communities where they collect verbal autopsy. And we have a CR committee at local government level. These are mostly to unlock the cases. For example, I think in most of our countries, we have some of the people who do not have these documents to be enrolled into systems because of many reasons. So the local committee at the local government level, they are the ones who sit and they decide, and they include village leaders to ensure that no one is left out or is not allowed to be registered. So it really helps a lot, especially in rural areas and hard-to-reach areas. And especially also in Rwanda, we have Rwandan communities living in neighboring countries or neighboring cities that cannot go to the capital city where the embassy is located. So it's easier for them to cross and then come to get their identity or register their events in Rwanda. So the local committee helps in those setups. So the legal review, we have, through the study and also the feasibility, the assessment, we came up with the amendment of our law on persons and family that extended the civil registration capabilities for only two events, the birth and death, to the health facilities. So it increased our point of service of registration from 416, because we have 416 sectors, to more than 3,224 offices now today. So we register birth and death in all health facilities, and the ministerial order now extended those powers to the Director of Health for health facilities, and also cells, especially for death occurring in communities, because we have above 60% of death occurring in communities. So the cell registration officer is the one that can be able to register it, and now they have tablets. They can also now do, within a period of 20 days after death, they go back to the family, then they can collect information that can provide probable cause of death through the questionnaires that is done. The law on person and family extends that those events only in health facilities. For example, you cannot do a recognition of a child born out of wedlock, but you only register, the child is registered to their mother because she's the one who's giving birth, in case she's not married. And then the recognition is still done at the sector office, because that one requires verification and also approval by declaration by the father of the child to recognize their newborn. Some of other events that are still happening at the sector office include marriage. Marriage is still happening at the sector office, but all these events are also registered at embassies. So we have these events at our sector offices in Rwanda, but we also have the same 9 events that are provided by our law, provided at our foreign embassies and consulate. So the reason our legal review were decoupled who's given the right to register the child. And so the law just gave permission to the health facilities and cell offices to register, but they did not say who. Because when we were enacting this law, we wanted to make sure that we bring flexibility when we go into practice, to ensure that when we go into practice, who exactly in the health facility will be given that provision. So this one was given by the ministerial order. And in our case, ministerial orders can be changed when we see that, for example, today the director of health, maybe they are not available to work over the weekend, and we see, for example, the head nurse is the one who's available all the time, then the ministerial order can be amended to allow the head nurse to register. So this has allowed us to really quickly move and adapt to the cases as we started practicing, because when we are planning and we're going to implementation, sometimes there are changes that happen. The pillars of our service system architecture and the development, our law, as I told you, has 9 modules. We started by developing the architecture, the business process models, the use cases, and to draw how they could be interlinked, also to ensure that the existing system, for example, the CRVS system is connected to the ID system, to the population registry system, but also to the electronic case management system for events especially occurring in Côte. That's adoption, divorce, and also recherche de paternité. I don't know how you say it in English. So we also have the training of system users. As I told you, we only had 416 users. Now we've increased to 2,148 cells and 612 health facilities. And health facilities includes district hospitals all the way to the health post at village level. We also, at the same time, also engage into behavior change communication, where we have live radio, talk show, and also like mobile vehicles that move around to talk about especially to inform parents that they do not have to go to the sector office to register, but they can do it immediately from the maternity. So that change also is accompanied by a lot of slogans, a lot of communication that we provide. So today on the implementation, we've already launched birth, death, marriage, divorce, an element of marriage, adoption, and recognition. In this coming financial year, we are going to work on guardianship and legitimization. The reason we also planned the implementation in different phases is we looked at the events that are mostly used from the citizen perspective, but also from the ecosystem. Those documents that are needed by people are the ones we started by implementing. The challenges that we encountered, it's mostly dealing with stakeholders. As I told you, we have a lot of stakeholders, all the ministries, agencies, and also the end user organizations. So we try to engage and identify their pain point, and because we cannot satisfy everybody, but we have to come up with a common minimum ground that we can all agree, and principles that can guide our relationship. We also have the end user outreach program, I had told you. We also have, because we launched this system during COVID, so we had to learn how to train people, the 3,000 people, how to train them, because we had planned to have like sessions, physical sessions when they discuss, because it also allows people to interact and you learn about challenges of others. So we came up now with videos and like cartoons and different tools that we use to ensure that users, service providers are engaged, but also citizens can learn through them. So they are open on our public channels, so that both the providers and the users can, by reading, they know what is required and what can be done and how long, and also they can claim, because that allows people also to claim, because they know if a service can take 3 days and it takes 4 days, you can now start legally claim for your right. The journey that we are going on now is to update and digitize our paper-based records, because we launched the digital one in 2020. So those ones, the records that we have before, we are now planning to, in this financial, when I say financial year, our financial year starts in July. So in July, we're starting with digitization of our paper records. The success factors is mostly political will and government support, because all our statistical reports are governed by the National Institute of Statistics that replies directly in the Ministry of Finance and the Prime Minister's office. So it allows us to have such a platform where we can engage and also have support from all the other stakeholders. We also securing financing, because implementing such a colossal project requires a lot of finance. So we got financing from the government of Rwanda, 68%, and GFF through the World Bank supported us on 32%. This was mostly on developing the SOPs and also the training of users, and the government is mostly to develop the system. So our CRVS system is completely done in Rwanda by a local company. And so it helps us a lot, because the challenges and the needs and the gaps, when it's a local organization, it's easier. That you don't have to be very detailed in the TOR, for example, because when you go into implementation, some of the things are implicitly known, and the challenges, they already know them. We also have the high ICT service penetration. Is in Rwanda, we have a government platform where we can apply for these services, and you can apply for the document. So it's much easier. We do not have to worry a lot of issuing the document. As soon as the registration is done, they receive an SMS with the identifier, and then because the registration is free, but the certification, you have to pay for it. So whenever you get the money, now you can just go on our Irembo platform, you apply for the certificate, it's issued, and you can print it wherever you want. So it brings in a bit of flexibility, and to also ensure that we have compliance and completeness from day one. And
out of time.
I think the last one is the availability of infrastructure at point of services, because in Rwanda we have fiber optic covering the country, so it was easier also to implement it as
excellent, wonderful. So hold your questions for Josephine. I know several of you need to ask her questions. Mr. KODIA, could you please give your presentation and also remain on time so that we have time to talk with the audience?
Okay, thank you very much. Let's be born in French, please, because we are talking about ID, birth certificate, but I think that it's time to come back in French. So let the translator be more efficient. Merci beaucoup. Au nom du ministre de l'Intérieur et de la Sécurité de la République de Côte d'Ivoire, le général Wagondo Dumondé, je voudrais vous remercier l'Assemblée générale de ID4Africa et particulièrement le docteur Joseph Atick pour cette opportunité qui est offerte à l'ONECI de pouvoir partager avec la communauté les actions que le gouvernement de Côte d'Ivoire met en œuvre en matière de modernisation de l'état civil. Comment apporter le développement, la sécurité et globalement investir sur le capital humain si l'on ne connaît pas les bénéficiaires? C'est cette question, et c'est à cette seule question que nous pourrons résumer les efforts qui sont déployés par ID4Africa pour nous rassembler ici. Et ces efforts sont également partagés par le gouvernement de Côte d'Ivoire qui a initié ce vaste programme de mise en place du registre national des personnes physiques dont l'état civil est le socle. Donc, à travers ces quelques planches, nous allons partager avec vous les éléments clés du volet état civil. Nous allons plutôt aller dans des éléments beaucoup plus techniques parce que, ayant ici une assemblée je peux dire, d'experts et ayant déjà vu plusieurs présentations sur les aspects légaux et autres, nous allons nous concentrer sur maintenant l'aspect technique qui soutient ce processus que nous sommes en train de mettre en place. Donc, réformer l'état civil en Côte d'Ivoire, une initiative en marche. Et cette présentation qui va être très rapide et technique va prendre la présentation du projet de digitalisation l'état d'avancement du projet, et puis le macro-planning pour dire où nous sommes et quels sont aussi les challenges. Donc, pour vous présenter rapidement le projet, c'est l'État de Côte d'Ivoire a décidé de le mettre en place pour avoir un système d'état civil performant, fiable et sécurisé, qui sera le socle de l'identité, parce que l'identité elle-même, pour que l'État puisse reconnaître un citoyen, il faut partir sur l'information que l'État détient sur cette personne. Et cela par l'introduction de nouveaux mécanismes, par la digitalisation et de processus API-CRV dont plusieurs de mes prédécesseurs ont parlé ici tout à l'heure en long et en large. Et par qui? Justement par l'ONECI, qui est l'Office national d'état civil et de l'identification, qui a la charge de mettre en œuvre ce programme. Le programme en lui-même ne peut exister que si autour de lui, il y a des acteurs, il y a un consensus et il y a une volonté politique qui s'exprime à travers tous ces acteurs, chacun dans une partie de la chaîne. On voit que déjà, pour que ce projet lui-même puisse être une réalité, il faudrait qu'il y ait autour de ce projet d'abord les personnes qui sont concernées, ce sont les populations en tout premier lieu. Ensuite, les personnes civiles des missions diplomatiques ou les officiers de l'état civil et les agents de collecte communautaire et sanitaire. Pour nous, c'est très important parce que l'idée, je vais le voir plus tard, c'était de rapprocher le service le plus proche possible des populations. Et ensuite, les magistrats et greffiers qui sont chez nous les dépositaires des livres et des registres d'état civil, et tout cela entretenu et soutenu par le gouvernement qui impulse par la politique. Le programme, comment est-ce qu'il se présente? On va partir de ce qu'il était avant et on va revenir maintenant sur ce qu'il est maintenant. Avant, la situation actuelle du processus mettait en œuvre deux intervenants principaux. Il y avait d'une partie le citoyen et de l'autre partie l'administration, chacun dans son rôle. Et le citoyen devait se déplacer vers le centre d'état civil. Il devait d'abord se déplacer. Quand on sait que chez nous, les centres d'état civil, les bureaux d'état civil sont parfois dans les communes, dans les sous-préfectures, alors que les naissances arrivent partout, y compris même dans les petits villages, dans les campements. Premier facteur, premier problème. Ensuite, il y a l'administration qui prend cet enregistrement et puis qui passe par tout ce workflow que vous voyez et qui transcrit jusqu'à ce qu'au point 4, on ait le juge qui certifie et qui finit par donner le registre d'état civil. Le gros problème, c'est qu'on le faisait secteur par secteur, centre d'état civil par centre d'état civil. Donc, dans les endroits les plus grands, on a autour du centre d'état civil, on a des bureaux d'état civil, mais ça ne couvre pas partout. Et le fait que le système ne se parle pas, il n'y a pas d'interopérabilité, on pouvait avoir dans le cadre des registres plusieurs déclarations et les registres ne se communiquaient pas entre eux, on ne pouvait pas avoir une base nationale commune. Le nouveau système d'état civil moderne, qu'est-ce qu'il apporte? On a toujours la collecte, la validation, qui est une étape qui se faisait de façon locale, dont vous validez à travers un registre local, bien que chez nous, certaines communes ont impulsé ce qu'ils appellent la digitalisation, mais c'était une digitalisation locale, et donc ils avaient des informations qu'ils avaient sur des machines, et lorsque ces machines sont détruites ou lorsqu'il y a un incident, on perd tous les livres, on perd tous les registres, et il faut parfois recommencer, et recommencer peut dire que parfois aussi on peut modifier l'information initiale. Et donc maintenant on a la collecte, on a la validation, mais on a ajouté maintenant une centralisation. Et cette centralisation fait que le système est maintenant centralisé et tous les habitants qui sont en Côte d'Ivoire, tous les faits d'état civil sont enregistrés dans ce système central en maintenant toujours la justice comme élément de contrôle, c'est-à-dire les magistrats. Donc tous les acteurs se retrouvent dans ces piliers que vous voyez, avec l'élément principal que maintenant nous avons impulsé, sinon redynamisé, les points de collecte communautaires qui sont dans des villages. Donc ceux-là disposent d'un smartphone qui, à travers notre partenaire Seamless et qui a développé un logiciel avec Digitech, nous permet d'aller au contact de la naissance, c'est-à-dire même pas dans les centres de santé, parce que parfois il y a des naissances chez nous qui encore échappent au système sanitaire classique. Donc, dans les villages, il y a des points de collecte communautaires où les agents sont formés pour enregistrer la naissance, un peu comme ce que ma collègue du Rwanda a dit tout à l'heure, mais là, nous avons ça partout dans les smartphones. Ensuite, les sages-femmes, au niveau des points de collecte sanitaire dans les hôpitaux, ils ont aussi le même système. Et puis, on a les bureaux d'état civil et ensuite les centres principaux d'état civil et les ambassades. Donc, tous ces systèmes-là de collecte sont interconnectés à un bureau central qui fait la validation et puis qui permet de produire, d'envoyer ces informations dans le fichier central. À partir du fichier central, la personne est identifiée avec un numéro national d'identification qui est unique, qui lui est attribué depuis la naissance. On ne va pas parler de l'identité parce que aussi à travers l'identité, on crée aussi ces numéros, mais tout ça est centralisé. C'est-à-dire votre identité que vous avez à travers votre carte nationale d'identité que nous produisons par l'ONECI dans le même système, avec notre même partenaire, est aussi lié directement à votre état civil. Et aujourd'hui, ce que nous faisons, avant de produire la carte nationale d'identité d'un individu, pour lequel le programme est en cours, nous allons vérifier dans le centre d'état civil si effectivement son acte de naissance est conforme à la déclaration qui est faite pour établir sa carte nationale d'identité. Ça nous permet de rattraper l'existant avec les nouveaux-nés et ensuite on va rattraper tout ça à travers la digitalisation. Donc l'approche maintenant de mise en œuvre, c'est qu'on a commencé par une phase pilote, pré-pilote, en février 2021. Mais quand je parle de phase pré-pilote, c'est-à-dire qu'on n'a pas fait un pré-pilote tout simplement, mais le pré-pilote est aussi la phase normale. Ça veut dire que les actes qui sont produits pendant ce pré-pilote sont aussi des actes valides. Et ça nous a permis de recueillir les informations, de voir comment est-ce que le logiciel allait se comporter sur le terrain. Et à partir de novembre 2021 jusqu'à janvier, on est passé maintenant à 17 centres. Donc, on a étendu ça avec 150 points de collecte sanitaire et dans les 8 régions. Nous avons ciblé pratiquement toutes les régions de la Côte d'Ivoire pour être sûr que nous imprègnons des réalités socio-démographiques dans chacune de ces parties. Et ensuite, maintenant, nous pensons, dès mai-août, nous allons monter en puissance pour passer à la phase de généralisation où nous livrons maintenant des actes d'état civil qui sont utilisés et conformes. La solution d'état civil, voilà ce qu'elle permet de faire. Elle permet de faire les naissances, décès, mariages, bon, tout ce qu'on a dit. Et donc aujourd'hui, nous avons tous ces éléments qui attribuent le NNI, qui donne aussi l'interopérabilité, et nous sommes à la numérisation des registres. Et tout cela doit permettre aux citoyens de disposer de son extrait date de naissance, mais aussi de faire sa carte d'identité, la carte d'électeur, avoir un certificat foncier, l'éducation, comme les autres ont dit, la santé, l'accès au microcrédit et surtout les e-services pour permettre aux citoyens de disposer de tout ça partout où ils se trouvent. Et je vous remercie pour votre attention.
Merci beaucoup. Merci, M. Kodian. Okay, we now will take some questions. So please raise the light in the room and let us see. Raise your hand. And I spot somebody here on the right. Please state your name, your organization, and your question.
Merci, docteur, de la parole donnée. Je suis Ebela Jean-Hyacinthe du Bureau national de l'État civil du Cameroun. Ma question s'adresse, avant de la poser, je voudrais féliciter les participants pour la clarté de leurs exposés. Ma question s'adresse à la présentation du Kenya, du Rwanda, pardon. Est-ce que nous pouvons avoir les taux d'enregistrement des différents faits que vous avez présentés, que vous enregistrez chez vous, pour essayer d'apprécier la performance de votre système? Merci.
So, Josephine, you want to answer in English? Whatever you feel most comfortable with. Yeah, it's on.
Ah, OK. Les naissances aujourd'hui, nous avons l'enregistrement qui atteint plus de 90% aujourd'hui. Et les décès, malheureusement, ils ne sont pas si élevés. On a, je crois, le rapport va sortir bientôt, mais on était dans les 30 à 40% sur le completeness, mais sur la notification, on était à plus de 50% pour les décès. Et les mariages, ça c'est à 100% parce que ça se fait déjà au niveau de l'état civil et les autres effets. Mais c'est surtout pour la naissance. La notification avant, elle était élevée, mais maintenant c'est l'enregistrement total avec octroi de l'identifiant unique
qui est maintenant à presque 90%. Oui.
Okay, we have a question here on the left, all the way to the left, please. Yes, please rise and state your name, your institution, and your question. Anybody else, please raise your hand so I can just be this and that and that. Then we lock that way. 1, 2, 3. Here as well. Have to be rapid. Let's just see. Okay, go ahead.
Right, thank you. Dr. Walt Aduru, Nigeria Digital Identification for Development Project. Thank you, the first presenter, for the discourse. I consider it interesting around birth and death registration. Please, how do you handle issues where citizens give birth at home or in local maternity homes and the likes? How do you capture that? And again, the issue of death. What percentage of your citizens report death in your country?
Okay, hold on. So, do you want both of them to answer it? Rwanda. Okay. Okay. The next question is going to be for Côte d'Ivoire. So, if you raise your hand and you're not Côte d'Ivoire, lower it.
So for home events, we do registration at the cell office, and the cell is the closest to home. We have 2,148 of them, so it's within the community. So birth occurring in communities, which is below 5%, are done at the cell office. And for same as death occurring in communities are done at the cell office, but the death in health facility are done in health facility. Does that answer?
Okay, a question for Côte d'Ivoire, yes? Yes, here.
Merci. Abdon Marius Mekpoinyi, le directeur de l'État civil de la République du Bénin. Et effectivement, ma question s'adresse à la République sœur de la Côte d'Ivoire. Je salue par ailleurs la communicatrice de la sœur du Rwanda. Je voudrais savoir l'expérience de la Côte d'Ivoire, sachant que en Afrique de l'Ouest, nous sommes sous la menace terroriste qui plane un peu sur presque tous les pays de l'Afrique de l'Ouest. Je voudrais savoir le mécanisme que la Côte d'Ivoire a mis en place, histoire d'identifier les citoyens vivant le long des frontières. Je m'en voudrais que vous nous donniez un point de vue sur cette préoccupation qui, plus est, intéresse tous les pays de l'Afrique de l'Ouest actuellement. Je vous en remercie.
Ok, merci beaucoup. Je pense que aujourd'hui, ce registre déjà que nous sommes en train de mettre en place, on a parlé de sa composante état civil, donc ça permet déjà de prendre les naissances quand on sait que dans les frontières de la Côte d'Ivoire, on partage beaucoup de similitudes avec les autres pays. Donc déjà, vous avez vu que dans notre programme, on a commencé à prendre les 8 régions de la Côte d'Ivoire en nous concentrant justement à travers les endroits où il y a le plus de flux de population. Donc, nous disposons de ce registre, nous donnons le NNI, mais la phase qui va suivre maintenant sera de donner un document qui est une attestation d'enregistrement au RNPP. Donc, avec ce document, on sait tout de suite que cette personne est dans notre registre et nous avons commencé dans le plan par les phases 1, qui sont les zones les plus touchées par le phénomène terroriste. Bon, souffrez que je n'en dise pas un peu plus, parce que ça fait partie aussi d'une stratégie sécuritaire, mais c'est à partir de ce document-là que nous allons pouvoir avoir justement les personnes qui se déplacent entre les deux pays, étant donné que le système intéresse les Ivoiriens comme les étrangers.
Okay, the gentleman in the back, first row. Yes, Usher, behind you. No, the gentleman behind. Yes, gentleman behind. Keep your hands raised for those who want to continue asking questions. I want to see if we have, where we have you.
So, my name is Bhaskar Mishra, and I work at UNICEF headquarters. My question goes to Rwanda. The drop-off between registration and certification is a big concern, and we have also noticed that in case of Rwanda. For example, if you look at DHS 2019-20 data, you have birth registration for under 5 is almost 86%, but when you come to the certification rate, it is 17%. And with the kind of system that you have managed to set up in Rwanda, we were hoping that registration and certification will be done in one-stop process. Okay. So what is, and if you continue to charge for the first copy of birth certificate, then this is going to complicate the matter. I have a follow-up question for Ivory Coast also, that could you also explain a bit about your engagement with the health sector? Thanks.
Okay. Asher? Okay, Rwanda.
Yes. We know that we have a challenge on the raising the certification level because it is monetized. You have to pay for it. So one of the among the strategies we are looking at is to look at the ecosystem where those certificates are used. So they are the ones, the more certificates are required in the processes, the more people go for those certificates. So those includes schools, those includes registration into the social security platform, and also for application of other documents, including passports and the other documents. So we are looking at how to go, because we use the same strategy for the ID card, where the more the ID is used in a lot of processes, the more people naturally go and apply for it. So we also want to use the same strategy for the birth records, where we will be using it from the end point coming back to the citizen, because when you issue a document and it's never used anywhere, enforcing it becomes a bit hard.
Okay, Côte d'Ivoire.
Okay, thank you for your question. I was wondering to say that maybe my presentation was so worse, so anybody understand something, though there are no questions, but thank you to wake up me a little bit. Our government adopted the solution to go with one partner in a solution I can call it as all-in-one. All-in-one means ID system and birth registration system, immigration, all are centralized with one partner. But we still have a relation with other sectors, other partners, regarding to the e-solution, the solution we can provide to the population to get benefit of the system. So our system is open because we still want to make more production with the database. So it's open.
But the health sector, both of you are actually reforming civil registration by allowing the health sector to become essentially registrars. Now, when we dealt with this issue in the past, the health sector was not enthusiastic about taking this on because they felt this is an added responsibility. Did it come with an added compensation or some reward for the health sector, or they just did it out of the goodness of their heart? In both cases.
Okay, in the case of Côte d'Ivoire, the health sector was very enthusiastic to have now a new system, digitalized. So they help us, and they are among the committee who is preparing this civil registration new system, because we have a committee, and as you know, the birth, at the first point to have a birth certificate is at the hospital.
Right.
And also for the death case, something.
But they've taken on the responsibility of being a registrar.
Exactly.
Okay, and what about Rwanda?
Yes, it's the same, but also it helps because they are also the beneficiaries of in the HMIS. Because the earlier they identify the person, the earlier they can get them as customers.
As customers, okay. Yes. The earlier they get them as a customer. So this is actually a lesson learned, which is the health sector as a partner is a very, very important reform, but you have to change the law to allow that to happen. In both cases, the law did not allow for that. Okay, I've got now a situation. I'm going to take a question here, and then the two gentlemen who raised their hand side by side, they have to negotiate among themselves, because I only have one person. The two of you have to discuss it. So, quick question here, and then one question from the two over there. So, I'm sorry, we're running out of time.
For very well articulated presentation. I have two questions from, for the two. I would like to know how you are handling the emerging issues, because one of the emerging issues we are having in Kenya is to know how to register intersex persons. So I would like to know from you how you are handling it. The other issue is on the street families, who you find here today, tomorrow they are in another place. I would also like to know how you are handling the street families. Thank you.
Okay, quick response, please.
If she might just repeat, you said emerging issues? Intersex.
What is intersect?
What is intersex?
Oh, transgender. Transgender. Intersex.
Oh.
Okay.
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 Transgender. Sorry, okay.
So, constitutionally, we have male and female. We don't have the third one. So, yeah. If they come as male, they are male forever. If they are female forever. For street families, so we have two ways. If their point of service is a health facility, they can be served at the health facility. You don't need to provide a proof of residence. And in case it's a street family that does not belong anywhere and their event occurred in community, that's the committee at the local government level that handles the cases. So the community actually helps them to be onboarded by having, it's getting a person vouching that indeed they are Rwandans and they somehow live there for at least 30 days.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, is there anything else you need to add, Mr. KODIA?
Just to add that our program now just is in the mechanism in the official program. But when we raise a certain level, the ONECI will go to the population and meet them. So even you are in the street or wherever you are, we'll find you and keep your data on the system. Okay. And also, you have the opportunity to go to the judge to make the transcription of your birth certificate, and we'll add it in the system and give you a unique number.
Okay, so Usher, please go to the gentlemen who are negotiating. So now we see who won the negotiation. In the meantime, I'll tell you tomorrow the workshop number 3, which we're doing in partnership with UNICEF, Mission 100.
Merci.
And this is going to be a very, very important workshop for you. There are a lot of questions in the audience. So for those who are contributors, you'll have the microphone. For those who are observers, please attend and listen. The debate and the discussion is going to be very interesting. So
Merci.
Go ahead.
Merci. Jean Aholou, coordonnateur du projet Wouri, Bénin. Ma question s'adresse à la Côte d'Ivoire. J'ai compris, d'une part, que la Côte d'Ivoire s'attache à la réalisation d'un fichier central de l'état civil, d'un côté, avec la réalisation concomitante du registre national des personnes physiques. Quel est l'arrimage que compte faire la Côte d'Ivoire avec la mise en place d'un système d'identification de base qui n'est qu'un ensemble minimal d'attributs biographiques et biométriques? Quelle est l'image qui compte se faire à ce niveau pour prendre en compte aussi bien d'une manière inclusive toute la population résidente, c'est-à-dire les nationaux et les non-nationaux? Merci.
OK, donc le système en Côte d'Ivoire prend en compte 27 champs. Et pour ce que je sais, le programme Wouri en prend moins. Donc les champs qui sont pris en compte dans le programme Wouri sont effectivement pris en compte dans le système d'identification actuel de la Côte d'Ivoire. Donc, à la base, nous allons souhaiter simplement qu'on vienne chercher à travers le programme Wouri les éléments nécessaires, parce que nous voulons une seule base unique pour éviter qu'il y ait qu'on reprend. Donc, nous couvrons 27 champs, et donc pour lesquels toute la population est prise en compte. Mais le système d'état civil, il prend en compte toute naissance en Côte d'Ivoire, tous ceux qui ont le document, mais dans le RMPP, on va prendre en compte aussi toutes les personnes vivant en Côte d'Ivoire à travers les 27 champs que nous collectons. Donc, le programme Wouri trouvera sa base de données dans les 27 champs à travers le même numéro national d'identification unique pour tout le monde, ivoirien comme non-ivoirien ou de passage en Côte d'Ivoire.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Please join me in thanking the two speakers who've really whet our appetite about the reform of civil registration, its importance. So thank you. I'd like now, this is the segment you've all been waiting for. This is the segment of the heavyweights. The heavyweights are going to be up on stage. DJ Aziz, Ruben Kimoto, Thomas Sigama, and Rosemary Kisimbo, representing Nigeria, Kenya, South Africa, and Uganda. Why are they heavyweights? I can assure you they are slim. This has nothing to do with their weight. They're healthy, in good shape. Thank you. They're heavyweight because they've got experience, tremendous experience. I've known many of them for so many years. It's been my privilege. Some have been recent additions, but they come to the stage with enormous amount of experience. And we agreed that we want to benefit from their experience. Thomas, I will just do the new way of shaking hands. Okay, in this session, we're going to mix and match. I will ask them some questions to engage them, and I'll allow you also to ask them questions. I want to start by asking these seasoned executives of national identity authorities, how do you know how well your system is doing? What gives you a dashboard feeling that, yes, I'm doing well? All right, let me ask it differently. How well is your system doing?
Okay, thank you very much. For the Nigerian system is that if the citizen can go to an enrollment center and enrolls, and within 24 hours gets the national identification number, and then maybe within another 24 hours, that number will be available for immigration, for education purposes, and wherever verification will happen. Then the citizen is happy, and then we will say that the system is healthy.
So, do you have a dashboard that tells you how many people are getting their NIN and getting their activation of the NIN within that service level agreement?
Well, we don't have a public dashboard, but that's what we hope to provide. But internally, in our system, we do have, and I can view daily reports and see the progress.
So this is how you keep your team going, because you have a metric that basically says we are customer service oriented. We need to make sure the people who we are serving are actually happy with our service level.
Sure.
Okay, so that's legitimate. Ruben, anything you can give a different color to this answer?
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Atick and participants. You have asked a very pertinent question, that when we review ourselves, how can we rate our IDD system? In Kenya, we believe that we have the best of the systems. And we are aspiring even to be better. Why am I saying this? We have had an ID system from 1911. And over time, we've gradually been improving on that ID system. We have also come up with the programs of implementing the goals 1619. In all ways, Kenya is the only country where you find a lot of migrant communities who have been with the country for a long time have recently been documented, the stateless. We documented some from Mozambique. We documented the other day some from Somalia. We documented some others from Mozambique. And again, when it comes to improve tying identity systems, it's very important that as we come up with identity systems, we must be able to dovetail on civil registration. Because if you start with a unique, very well-developed ID system, and what goes into that ID database has no credentials, it has not been matched, then I think, to the best of my colleagues from government, we might find that you may have to come back once a year again to try to refine it. So if I came to that, we could say in Kenya, we are not yet there, but we are improving cost-benefit analysis. We are saying we don't want to come up with very ambitious programs, because you can come up with a very ambitious ID program, and in between, you discover that maybe there are issues here and there which require to be improved. So what are we doing in Kenya? We are learning from others. Chair, as we speak now, you talked about legal system. We are coming up with a new law for legal identity. And for purpose of that, we even came with our members of parliament. I don't know whether they are here.
Yes, I think.
Members of parliament from Kenya, are you here? They are here? Yes.
Yes,
Those are members of
identify
parliament from Kenya. So that they can run from the best of the systems. And as we go back to Kenya, when now we'll be implementing our legal framework, they will be able to say, yes, we are part and parcel of it. So, Chair, I don't want to take a lot of time for
that's good. I understand.
Yes, but
Rosemary,
yeah,
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Let's get Rosemary's perspective. I'll turn back the questions in a minute.
Thank you very much. Uganda's foundational system is 8 years old.
Yes.
It's at 62% national registration. Our foundational system has 4 parts to it. It has the citizen register, the alien register, the birth register, and the death register, which brings me to your question. How do you know your system is performing well? It begins with a legal framework. The legal framework that takes into account the life cycle of a person. Second to that is the ICT infrastructure and the intergovernment association, the ecosystem within which the foundational register lives. Today, our foundational register is hosting about 10 million requests to verify information per month. So that is the extent of use and verification. So it's also a measure of, is this system living? Is it in use?
Okay.
Yes, I will address the controversy. Even the criticism is also a message of how do you know how well or how badly your system is performing. I take long to receive my ID. I take a short time. The birth, death registration rates of the country are other metric. But also the importance of the register to areas like public service, and I'll give an example. When you are able to relieve an economy of ghost employees, because each employee of government can be clearly identified, then your system is alive. And then, of course, the biggest client of the foundational register is the citizen or the alien living in the country. Their feedback is critical. We're not where we should be, but we're working to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosemary. Thomas?
Thanks very much, Dr. Atick. Yes, as South Africa, we are trying our best. We started the journey in 2010, wherein we had to make sure that we review our legislation. And in this case, we had to look into our Birth and Death Act, which had a lot of gaps. And most of the parents did not know the importance of birth registration. We had to go all out to make sure that we embark on advocacy and awareness. And we had to visit deep rural areas in one of the provinces so that the nation can know the importance of birth registration. And from there on, we had to start the process of measuring whether the message that was sent is really coming across the entire population. When we started, in 2010, we found ourselves being able to register 500,000 births in a year, and the number increased from 2010 up to in 2021, we were able to register close to 800,000 births within 30 days. During the advocacy period, it was very clear, it was very easy. We only sent one message to say, as a citizen or as a resident, make sure that the birth of a young one is registered within 30 days. After 30 days, know that you are breaking the law. So that message had to be spread across the country via media, print media, television, and everyone had to understand the importance of birth registration. That also enriched our National Population Register, which is the foundation of our identity system. So we had to build integration within our other systems such as HANIS And HANIS in this case is our Home Affairs National Identification System, which stores both the fingerprints as well as the photos, but it takes the basis from our demographic data, which is the National Population Register. So there are interfaces built in both systems wherein we verify information on daily basis. Just to cut to the point, Dr. Atick, we have got dashboards that are built on both NPR as well as our national identification system. On daily basis, we're able to drill down to an office level where we are able to know how many births were registered in the previous day, how many certificates were issued, and how many kids are registered in a financial year. So we know that in a year, almost 1 million births are being registered. That includes both that are registered within 30 days and those that are registered above 30 days. Mm-hmm. And the key to the whole thing is that there are messages that are sent out. If you've got a birth certificate, you are able to register for school. If you've got a birth certificate, you can also gain access to our social grant program wherein we always pay out. And those are messages that encourages parents to then come and register. And such birth certificates are issued on the spot. We don't send people back to say, come back again. So in terms of the smart card, which is our modernization program, indeed, we do have a program that was built as from 2013. And when we started, we had only 27 offices. And that number in the first financial year, I think we only issued close to 1 million. As we speak right now, South Africa has issued more than 19 million smart ID cards to citizens that are deserving cases. So we are not yet there, but the process, with the plan is to make sure that we ramp up for both people who have got green barcoded IDs so that they then gain access to the smart ID cards. Thank you.
Hold on to this point. I asked this question with a purpose, which is you've got 4 leaders of identity authorities who have answered this question very, very differently. And the reason is, at the end of the day, the very fundamental question, which is, what should identity authorities be tracking and reporting on in order to improve their transparency, in order to communicate to their populations about the progress they're making? That question does not have a standard answer. And that's why we have the workshop tomorrow, workshop 4, which I've given the mission to the World Bank team, wonderful team, to be working with you all as contributors to try to understand what is it that we should be reporting on. How well are we doing? I mean, I don't know what politician in the US used to come in and was always, Mayor Koch. If you know Mayor Koch or Mayor of New York, raise your hand. Nobody knows? 1, 2, 3, 4. Mayor Koch used to come, and every time he would shake somebody's hand, he would tell the citizen, how well am I doing? How well am I doing? And that's what we should be doing as identity authorities. We should be shaking the hand of the citizens and say, the people in our country, and saying, how well are we doing? But in order to make this process a little bit better, we need to build standards for what is it that we need to track and report on. So that's one segment. Let me switch on to another segment, and I want to start by asking you all, you are issuing a national identity number, is that correct? All of you, right? You have a unique identity number, Thomas, unique identity number. So all of you have a unique identity number, and those identity numbers are going to be linked to services, and you are going to be delivering services based on these unique ID numbers. Some critics argue that you're enabling surveillance of the activities of the population. Instead of simplifying the administration of matters, you're actually enabling surveillance. So I'll start with the DJ Aziz, and I'll ask you, do you believe national ID numbers are necessary? And if they're necessary, how do you prevent them from allowing surveillance to happen?
Thank you very much. I really believe that national identification number is necessary, because whenever you create a database, you need an index that will make the uniqueness of that database, and that uniqueness is the national identification number. But if it is being proliferated in so many places, then it may become dangerous, and you need a way to make it private to the citizen. As I said earlier, whatever we do, we are doing it for the citizen. Therefore, in our own case, we have accepted the norms, and we come up with tokenization, that the citizen is empowered to tokenize the NIN and give it for a service, and it lasts for only about 72 hours. After that, that tokenized NIN is expired. So, and we do it for citizens that have smartphone, and also people that don't have smartphone. That
USSD,
have,
no?
USSD code. Yes, they can use the USSD code. I also want to appreciate that Nigeria has the largest contingent. We also have our legislators here.
Yes.
You have had the minister before. We have
exactly.
Population Commission chairman that is here.
Actually,
we have head of some
your
of
delegation
our services.
is 130
and also
people
the World Bank project implementation unit is also here, just to learn from others, and also make sure that our system is fault-tolerant because of the large population that we have and its complexity.
Actually, while the others are thinking about the responses, I need to drill a little bit down on the concept of tokenization, because this has become at the heart of what you are doing. You basically said, yes, we need a unique national ID number. It's called the NIN. Everybody's assigned the NIN. But we believe we can avoid surveillance because a citizen can, starting with a mobile phone conveniently, or a USSD channel on a feature phone, every time they want a service, they provide a valid number, but that valid number is not the NIN.
It's not. It's not the NIN.
It's a virtual NIN.
It's a virtual NIN.
And so me, let's say, or you, Aziz, you will, DJ Aziz, you will be in the health database, you will be in the finance database, etc., but under a different number. Is that correct?
Yes.
And even though the number that was used expired, it doesn't mean it gets deleted. It just...
No, it's not deleted.
Okay.
It can be reconfirmed back.
It can be reconfirmed back.
This is the person that has been issued. This is the sector, because the organization also matters, because if you have gone to the banking sector to do a service, no need to take that that number to an education to do examination.
Okay, so Nigeria believes we can protect it through tokenization. Kenya, do you believe you have a mechanism to protect the unique ID number? Could be the Huduma number.
The ID number is not only necessary for a functional ID system, it's a must. And maybe under that, the ID number must be matched to biometrics. That's what now would make an individual unique. If you're trying to identify one individual from the other one, there must be certain benchmarks. And one of them, of course, is the number. Of course, and that's what I have said. That number can only be recognizable through use of biometric, especially fingerprints.
So basically you're saying the number may not be private, but your biometrics that are linked to it are private. So even if they have the number, it's not usable unless you have the biometric. You mean authentication has to come?
Yes, maybe let me explain. And when I was talking about Kenya, maybe I was trying to blow my trumpet, but of course, when you're on a podium like this one, you take advantage. I saw my colleagues from Nigeria blowing theirs. And I decided, Kenya, 96% of all the adult registered population has been registered, and they have an ID, and an ID which is unique, depending on the biometrics. It is that number which is used by, I don't know whether to say any, but it is all. In Kenya, you cannot carry out any transaction, whether it's government, financial, even social, without your ID number and your ID. Why the ID number is crucial? When we started our first ID system, we called it first generation, 1978. We found there was duplicity in a lot of numbers. People would go to a local center, they would register there, go to another one, register. And we ended up having a lot of manipulation of data, and some of it for fraudulent means. Again, you would also get foreigners who would try to ride on numbers of certain Kenyans and be issued with an identity card. So identity card number should be imperative, importance, and to make it more work, it must be unique to that individual. As we speak now, there was this issue of electoral, whether identity card should support an electoral system. In Kenya, not by electoral law, not by our law, but by electoral law. Under the electoral law, it is well stated that after the register has been closed, that data must be matched by the National Registration Bureau. And as we speak now, we are heading into elections. Out of all the Kenyans who registered in the voters register, at the National Registration Bureau, we were able to wind up duplication of IDs, some people who didn't exist, and some people who are not even Kenyans, who are trying to acquire fake documents. So identity card number, which is matched to the biometrics and unique to a person, is imperative.
So Kenya, unique ID number is there, but you gotta protect it. You gotta protect it maybe by law, by privacy laws, or you're saying we should add some biometrics to protect it because it's not tokenized. You don't do tokenization in Kenya as yet.
Yeah.
Okay. Rosemary, what's your perspective on the unique ID number? Do you share your colleagues or do you have a diversion with them?
Yes. A unique ID number is just an extrapolation of the culture of Africa. A name. It's a name, but it's a name from government's perspective. And it's tied to a biometric profile which we pick from your face, your iris, or your fingerprint. So how do we protect the uniqueness of this ID number from the risks? The risks vary. You've mentioned surveillance. You've mentioned a couple of others. I think there's an important interplay between technology, process, and people. And I will explain. Even if you put tokenization and I do not protect my token, or I don't have the understanding of the importance of data protection of my personal data, no amount of technology will shield the population from misuse of their data. So I think in Uganda we are saying, this is your NIN, it's important, keep it. Don't just give it to everybody. Number two, there is a technology, there is the biometric verification, which is possible with the identity. There's an interface, there's an API, and you can verify authenticity of a biometric accuracy of it and protect it. And in the coming year, the country is getting into a phase where we'll have a digital version of your biometric profile to secure further a digitally signed ID to secure further your digital profile. Because the risk now is protecting the identity of a person online. So for that, Uganda is saying, look, we shall sign your profile and we shall be able to securely allow you to transact online. Okay. So the last one is process. The process of verification, the process of authentication, the process of enrollment, the process of keeping data, the process of exchange, all through that process, there are mechanisms that are in place to protect the unique identity of an individual. Thank you.
Okay. While Thomas prepares himself to answer the question, please raise your hand if you want to ask any specific member of the panel a question. So make it specific to a country. So I'll note you in my field of view while Thomas answers the question about the risks of the national identity number being exploited for surveillance. So, Thomas?
Thanks very much, Chairperson. Yeah. South Africa allocates an ID number at birth. And when we register the baby at that level, we make sure that that ID number is issued and it's kept for life. We don't change it unless the person then amends the date of birth or gets married and there are other issues that are raised. So in the process, when that person, the very same person, attained the age of 16, that's where now that person qualifies to apply for an ID book or for a smart card. That's where we have to add certain biometrics on that particular ID. And in this case, we add the fingerprints as well as the photos. So earlier on, I spoke about the HANIS system, which is the Home Affairs National Identification System. That's where now the interface is built between National Population Register as well as HANIS. So we then use the demographic data that has been collected from the population register. We then add it to our HANIS, wherein there's a link between the two biometrics that have been collected. So that, in a process, helps us to make sure that we then protect our ID. We also have an act, which is the POPI Act, Protection of Personal Information Act, which was passed, I think, somewhere in 2013, which is Act number 4. That also protects all the information that has been collected from individuals by the Department of Home Affairs. How we try and protect it going forward, as and when the clients come and apply for IDs at the age of 16, we have to make sure that we go back to our National Population Register, verify the demographics, make sure that we also verify information that had been provided before, and thereafter, then the system will then give us a green light, just like a robot system, which is green, amber, or red. Green meaning that everything is verified against the system and it's okay. Amber meaning that there's some form of variation or there's some form of doubt, which then needs the department to go back to the archives and then verify the information that was submitted at the point of birth registration. So the team will then go back to our archives, throw the paper-based records, which, by the way, Chairperson, we are in a process now of digitizing all our paper-based records that we also enrich our database. And going forward, we are saying we want to move away from just taking photos as well as fingerprints. Now we are adding other models.
Yes.
And in this case, we are going to introduce a system called ABIS soon that will then take palm print, iris, and you name them. So we are about to launch that system, which will then consolidate almost everything that we've been collecting from persons.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, Asher, please head towards that individual. In the meantime, I want to appeal to all the identity authorities, not just the ones on the stage, but everywhere, to take 2022 and consider reviewing their legacy systems for privacy by design improvements. Because I think there is a room here for us to go in and say, it's not enough to basically rely on the legal framework. We want to make sure that if there's somebody with a nefarious intention, they're unable to do it because the design of the system prevents them from doing it. The greenfield people who are doing this, they don't have this problem because they're starting fresh, so they can build privacy by design. The legacy systems, I urge everybody to launch a study of their system, do an assessment, just like you do privacy impact assessment, do an assessment for opportunities to build privacy by design. It's not enough to rely on the legal framework. It's not, in our opinion, it's not enough to rely on the biometrics attached to the unique ID number. This number is important. It's the identity of the person, but it enables something very scary, which is the idea that you can be tracked. Look at what happened in India. India acted and resolved this problem. Nigeria anticipated and had created this. The question, DJ Aziz, and you don't have to answer it, but in my mind, is that It's the use of the tokenization. You built the mechanism. Are the people sophisticated enough to understand how to do it, just like Rosemary was saying? That remains to be seen. Okay, the question, please.
So I'm Sudhanshu Jain from PwC. The question is in two parts. One is, since you're a mature country, what are the top 3 learnings you would want to give to the countries which are starting? That's part A. Part B is, now that you have a mature ID, how are you planning to use that to build a stack which can power your digital economy, like the minister was speaking at the start of the session?
The question is for DJ Aziz?
Anyone can answer it.
Okay, no, I don't want anyone can answer it.
The
because,
first,
because
the
then
first
it's going
gentleman.
to be, okay, choose your target.
The first gentleman.
Okay, DJ Aziz, how do you intend to use the digital ID to empower the government stack?
Okay, well, thank you very much for the question. And I believe that as this, what we've been hearing here about ecosystem is to build an ecosystem that is sustainable. And that is done by working with all the other agencies. That is why we have most of them also here. Like we are working with the Population Commission also to ram up the numbers because they have census that is coming up next year. We have worked with the examination body that we call JAM. They are also here to clean up the process so that to have only genuine people that can sit for the examination. And it has not been easy when we started it at the beginning, and so many children are coming for enrollment, so it has to be scrapped. They said next year, we said, yes, we are still around. So next year, again, we tried it. Then it was successful. This is the second time that we have done that. So there are many ways of utilizing the data. We work with the banking sector, as the minister says, to clean up, again, the financial sector. And we work with the INEC, that is the voters register, to also harmonize. Because, as you said, the laws are there, but implementing the laws, that is why we need to then build those relationships.
Actually,
once that there are the relationships, then we are sure of making
DJ Aziz, you once told me outside that, in fact, at the core of your stack was your authentication service. Basically, you've got the database, and then surrounding that was an API that allows your partners to do authentication and therefore start empowering their businesses relying on the authentication platform that you have.
Yeah. Well, we started, again, the authentication just started by providing, mainly because when you talk of private sector, it's usually the banking sector. So we started by allowing them to do the authentication free of charge for more than a year, and then come back if you are interested. Then some of them that are really forward-looking said, yes, this is very good, and it's helping us in
their business,
in our own business. Some of them have to be enforced, like the SIM registration. Again, working with the telecommunication sectors, initially they were against it. They thought that it will reduce their profit, but they found out that actually it helps them to clean up their system, and also they are able to utilize it to then get more profit. So it's everywhere. The stack is.
Yes, the stack is connected to all the businesses in the sectors. Actually, if you have a question for Rosemary, and then if you have a question for Ruben, and if you have a question for Thomas, I want to do it that way. So raise your hand if you have a question for Rosemary, for Uganda. Anybody that has a question for Uganda? You do? Yes. Here, Uganda. Yes, afterward, Uganda will be you. Let's make them quick questions, please. Please.
Thank you very much. My name is Dr. Emmanuel Akogu. I'm from Nigeria, and I work with Nigeria Digital ID for Development. I'm happy to have my DG on board, so this question will not go to him. Uganda.
Yes.
Yeah, you know, Africa is bedeviled with illiteracy. And with that in mind, since we are on a learning event like this, so how can we learn from your experience how you are able to manage the level of literacy in terms of validating the data that the literate give to you before it goes into your system?
So any lessons you can share with them from what your experience is?
Thank you very much. The experience of Uganda, as I said, started in 2014-15. And the first journey the nation took was to take the service as close as possible to the population in what was a mass enrollment exercise. What does that do? Because you are in a community and enrollment is happening in a community, the learning in the community can assist even the unlearned to fill a form that might be in one language. For example, at the enrollment center is a teacher. At the enrollment center is a mother or somebody else who will help with the process of enrolling the person. Now, the second thing which I'll pick from the previous discussion is the continuous use of data improves access, but also improves understanding. When someone goes and at the immunization, they are taught that to register your child, you have to be registered. That is additional learning. So the continuous use of this national or unique ID is increasing information in small bits, increasing literacy in small bits across the ecosystem of government. So right now, when you go for your passport, they'll ask you for your name. If you go for your driving permit, they'll ask you for your name. In essence, you are understanding your citizenship better with each interaction, whether in the Ministry of Education, whether in the Ministry of Health. So educational literacy is therefore incremental, and it's not happening all at once. But take it to the community, increase the use across government, and with increase of use, there will be misinformation, but there will also be increase of real information. Thank you.
Thanks, Rosemary. Actually, I need a question for South Africa or Kenya, otherwise don't ask. Okay, which one?
I'll go with South Africa.
Go ahead. South Africa for 100.
Okay, Colleen Elliott. I work for Microsoft, based in Canada. I'm the Global Digital ID lead. Happy to be here. Very impressed with this conference and the speakers so far. I wanted to ask about cybersecurity. So in North America, we don't have national IDs. We don't have national ID systems because that's seen as being a major risk. It's seen as being a honeypot of information and a target for cyber criminals. So in Africa, with the prevalence of these types of national ID systems, I wanted to ask how you're thinking about cybersecurity and protecting this very valuable systems that you've put in place, particularly because you have biometrics in there and so forth. So what's your cybersecurity strategy? Thank you.
Okay. Thomas, do you think you can take that?
Yes, Doctor, I can take that one. Thanks very much for that question. And indeed, it is at the heart of all South Africans and everybody who uses our information. One of the things that we've done was to make sure that we set up a team of IT specialists from various angles of the country, working closely with the banking sector. It's also assist us in making sure that we address some of these things at an early age. Then we also have an IT team in-house that performs the so-called daily monitoring of the system. They also perform health checks early in the morning and late in the afternoon before we close our systems. Then they also alert us if they are risk identified. Then secondly, the new system that we've built is built across the so-called ESBs, because we're quite aware that cybersecurity are issues that could crop up at any given point. So we've then built an ESB with various models, which in each and every gate we're able to test the risk of what is likely to happen, and based on the metrics that have been developed, we're able to test whether that could be mitigated or not. And thirdly, we are also in a process of trying to make sure that we then build a big, we call it a risk engine room, comprised of our CETA experts. CETA is the State Information Agency, wherein they then crop and then bring in all experts to try and make sure that we then address issues of cybersecurity that could happen at any given point. But the banking sector is also key because they do have a lot of experts that on a regular basis, we meet with them, and in this case, we meet with them on a monthly basis. And where there are challenges, they always alert us because they use our systems to verify and authenticate clients as and when they interact or transact with the banks.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Thomas. One last question for Kenya, so I don't keep you from a wonderful lunch that's going to be served in the Saraya restaurant, wonderful location. I hope you'll be able to come back, even though you'll be sitting by the pool having lunch. So, any question for Kenya? This is a question for Kenya, right? Okay, for the final. Asher, could you please hand the microphone to this gentleman? The extracting knowledge from the experience of identity authorities will continue to be a topic we'll bring through the live casts throughout the year. So make sure you stay tuned with us. Please, go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Emeolo Goudou from Benin. Ma question s'adresse vraiment au représentant du Kenya. Je voudrais juste savoir...
attendez, juste, you need the headphone. Kenya, je ne pense pas qu'il parle français, alors... OK. Sorry about that. English. It's easier if you can listen.
OK.
OK.
Le Kenya a présenté son système comme étant le meilleur système d'identification. Je voudrais juste savoir, de par leur expérience, comment ils ont pu prendre en compte les prisonniers, puisque le système se veut être un système inclusif. Juste savoir comment les prisonniers ont été pris en compte dans le système. Merci.
Okay, thank you very much. Like I said, in Kenya, we were lucky to have all the systems, whether in birth registration, immigration, or national identity, which were established way back in the early 20th century. And out of that, as we have been upgrading our systems pragmatically over time, whether it is passport system or ID system, even civil registration. And one of the essence of doing that is, first of all, to cut costs, to have a cost-effective systems. Again, and maybe I can go back to a question which was asked here today, whether ID systems are cost-effective in terms of population. I would say, not only in Kenya, in all countries, the benefits of an ID system transcends the cost of putting up a system.
But I think his question was, how do you make them inclusive enough so that somebody who's incarcerated actually is able to have a national ID number and be part of the system?
Actually, that's what I was getting to.
Okay.
So, what has happened in Kenya is that as we embrace the utility users, the ones I've talked about, now when it comes up to coming up with the new systems, we have a mechanism whereby all the agencies have forums which are established through a cabinet and some through the law, where we meet and decide how do we incorporate a citizen in an ID system? How do we incorporate as a system in a passport system or in a civil registration system? So when it comes to Kenya, and I would say, Honorable Chair, maybe without appearing to be deviating, we in East Africa, and my colleague here from Uganda can testify to this, we decided one way of improving the kind of data which an individual, kind of individuals we have in our databases, is for us to be meeting and to be borrowing from each other. Ugandans have come to our country. We have gone to Tanzania. We have gone to Rwanda. And today, you can travel to Uganda, you can travel to Rwanda with only use of an identity card. What does that mean? It means by the time you're including this individual into that database, there are all the, like my colleague here from Uganda has mentioned, there were all these operational safeguards to make sure that that individual who is getting there has been well documented and well vetted for.
Okay, so no matter in what interaction with whatever organization, health, law enforcement, immigration, civil, they're all part of your integrated information system?
Yes.
Okay.
Actually, we have a system we call integrated population registration system.
System, yes.
And that data is migrated to e-citizen. Yeah. If you are applying for an e-passport,
okay,
all you require to do is go and meet to the what we call our Huduma centers. We have 50 Huduma centers interconnected to our central database for purposes of services. And if you are applying for a passport, all you require is your ID number, you log into the system, and you apply for a passport.
Okay, Ruben, let's end the session here. Please join me in thanking the panelists for this. Like I said, we're going to take specific topics on the live cast throughout the year. Two quick announcements. On your way out, please, please, please make sure you hand over your headphone because it needs to be sanitized. Second, we are going to resume with the host country reveal at 3 o'clock. And then at 3:30, we will continue the session with the Technology Forum. In the meantime, please enjoy your lunch, which will be served in the Saraya restaurant. Okay? Thank you all for sticking with us. I know this was a long session. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Africa arise, Africa arise, Africa arise.